So we'll call this meeting to order of Thursday, September 5th, 2019. Please join me in the salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Suzanne, would you take a roll, please?
Commissioner Mitchell,
Present.
Commissioner Levy,
Here.
Commissioner Newman,
Here.
Commissioner Bongio,
Present.
Commissioner McCavour. Here. Thank you.
So, any modifications?
We have no modifications, but we do have, I believe, 14 supplementals that have been forwarded to you. We do apologize for that. Some of it is letters and information from the public, and I can go through all of those if you would like.
Up to you. I think we got them in front of us. We can look at them when we need to. So that takes us to approval of action summaries, and if I've got it right, and we've had a lot of changes, but I have 3 of them in front of me. We can do them one at a time, or we can do them all 3 together. Anybody have any questions, or?
I just had a modification to the July 11th action summary. The housing element item showed Melanie making the motion and Alan seconding it, but then Alan voting against it. And my recollection was that I made the motion and Melanie seconded it, but I'm not positive. So we might want to check that again. It doesn't make sense that Alan would second it and then vote against it. So.
I agree with you.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, do I have a motion to approve all 3 of them with that?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carries. Sorry about that. Now it's time for public comment. Anybody who wants to address the commission on any item that is not on the agenda, please come to the podium and address. Anyone? Okay. We'll move on to consent agenda. So to get an idea if anybody wants any of these pulled for public comment, public or the board, I'll go through them and we'll keep them on the consent if nobody has an objection or wants to talk about them. So number 1 is the DS final subdivision map, coastal development permit and special permit modification extension. Is anybody here to talk about that? Anybody on the commission? Nope.
No.
Seeing none, we'll leave that on consent. Number 2 is the Beaupre Heights final map subdivision extension. Anybody here to speak on that? Is that a yes? Yes. Okay, we have 1, so that's going to get polled. Number 3 is the L&A Enterprises parcel map subdivision. Anybody here to speak on that? Seeing none, I will leave that on consent. Number 4 would be Ozanian parcel map subdivision and special permit. Anybody here?
We don't need to pull this. It just want to make it clear that this is a continuance to September 19th.
Do we have to make a separate motion, or it'll go with consent?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Number 5, Town of Scotia LLC final map subdivision and plan development permit extension. Anyone? Seeing none, leave that on consent. Number 6, Caroline lot line adjustment and zone boundary adjustment. Anybody have concern? No, we'll leave that on consent. Number 7, Southern Humboldt Community Healthcare District General Plan Conformance Review. Anybody here for that? Seeing none, that'll go on consent. Number 8, SWCO Incorporated doing business as Satori Wellness Cafe and Lounge. Anybody care to have that pulled?
I'd like a presentation on that item, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so we'll have, that'll be on public. Number 9, Skylar Giordano conditional use permit. Sorry about that if I botched that name. Anyone? Seeing none, that's on consent. Number 10, Armco 2 LLC conditional use permit. Anyone? No, we'll put that on consent. Number 11, Bandwagon Gardens LLC conditional use permit. Anybody? That'll be on consent. Number 12, Paradise Flowers conditional use permit, special permit, and notice of merger. All good? Oops. Number 13, BFCCF LLC conditional use permit. Anyone? Nope. Number 14, Mermaid Spring Estate LLC conditional use permit. Anybody want to speak on that? Number 15, 30 Deep LLC conditional use permit and special permit. Anybody?
Yes, there is a supplemental asking for continuance to a date uncertain on that item.
Will that automatically happen like the other one if we put it on consent, or do we have to have a separate?
Need a motion and a vote on that, so please pull it off consent.
Okay, should we just do that now and get it
Sure.
done with? Do I have a motion to continue this to a?
I move that we continue the 30 Deep conditional use permit and special permit to a date uncertain, per the applicant's request.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So that concludes our consent agenda. So it looks like we will have everything on consent except for the Beaupre Heights final map subdivision and Satori and the SWCO Incorporated. That is Satori. Sorry about that. So those two. So do I have a motion to? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move items 1, 3, 4 through 7, and 9 through 14 on the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So with that, we will start with the Beaupre Heights. Noah.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, this is a second two-year extension for final map subdivision for the Beaupre Heights. It was approved about 6 years ago. There's been a couple of automatic legislative extensions. There hasn't been any significant changes that we are aware of, and so staff was recommending approval of the extension.
Any questions for staff before I open it up to public comment? So I believe there was somebody from the public that wanted to comment on this. Please come up.
Hi, I'm Rita McAtee. I'm on 2120 Norton Road in McKinleyville. And we own the property where the entrance to this subdivision will be. And I just had a couple questions. I don't know if this is the place that I ask, but one is, if in the future, a piece of property is sold along our property from the subdivision, can they come out from that property down our road, or do they have to enter and exit either on the Norton or the Murray Road property? Later, can they make an exit onto my road is what I was wondering.
That would be a
To my
question. I'll let the,
understanding, there's no,
So if we could have her ask her questions, and then we'll respond to them all at one time.
Okay, my second question is, it says 2-lane roadways as they approach the site, both of which are 2-lane roadways as they approach the site. Does that mean just a road, one going this way, one going this way, or is there going to be a turn-off road, to go into the property?
okay. Let's ask all your questions, then we'll let staff.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about the roads,
So I'll give
basically.
staff the opportunity to respond to those.
okay, well, and there is an approved tentative map, and it does have the proposed access for the subdivision. It's not off of somebody else's private road. There's two means of access. There's one off of, I believe it's Norton Road up to the north, and then there's one off of Murray Road on the south end.
And Norton Road is on our property. That's where they're going to be entering. So basically, I'm just wanting to be sure that that's going to be the main entrances, that they're not going to be able to come make their own entrance off of a piece of property farther up my driveway.
What was approved is on the tentative map.
Yeah. So I believe that, to answer your question, that shows it coming out on Norton Road.
So that it will be or two entrances,
That's
correct?
the way I would read it.
Yeah. And then the 2-lane, meaning one way coming the other, or are they going to make a turn-off road?
Once again, I'll leave it to staff, but I would assume that 2 lanes means
One,
one each way.
okay, thank you.
Bob, would you like to respond to that?
Bob Bronco, Public Works Department. With respect to the Beaupre subdivision, the roads within the subdivision itself are proposed to be 2-lane roads with 1 lane in each direction. And confirming what Michael had mentioned, there are 2 entrances. One is the extension of Norton Road into the subdivision, and the other is a brand-new road that would stub off of Murray Road.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else that would like to speak on this matter? If not, I'll bring it back to the commission. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move approval of the continuance of the subdivision.
We have a motion. We have a second.
No, second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
So I just to be semantically correct, the word continuance was used. This is an extension of the tentative map,
Okay.
or the final map.
Didn't catch that. Thank you. All right, so, and then the second one was the Satori, something, I don't remember how you spell it. The SWCO Incorporated, doing business as Satori Wellness Cafe and Lounge.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Portia Salcedo, the assigned planner for this project. This is a conditional use permit for Satori Wellness Cafe and Lounge. The proposed business is located at 1551 Nursery Way in Unit C, which you can see here represented by a star, within an existing structure. You can see the street view, the entrance looking both north and south for the main entrance. The site shares a parking area with a medical facility to the north and has 36 developed parking spaces, which satisfies the parking requirement of 32 spaces for all existing and proposed uses. The proposed cafe and lounge is the third commercial business in the 1551 complex and will be located specifically within the Unit C, as outlined here in red. The other two approved projects include a dispensary in Unit B, here, and a distribution facility in Unit A. These are both approved projects. The proposed hours of operation are Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 9 p.m., and Sundays, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. The cafe and lounge proposes to collectively employ 48 employees, 21 years and older, and the power is provided by PG&E, while water and sewer are provided by the McKinleyville Community Service District. The unit is approximately 2,000 square feet. It will be a standalone business separate from the dispensary and the distribution warehouse. Vinyl stickers will be applied to the entirety of each window with a design that coheres with the building's current aesthetic, thus barring the view of cannabis consumption from the outside building. An air filtration system with multiple carbon filters is proposed to mitigate the odor impact in the vicinity of the cafe and lounge, as well as within the building itself. The proposed project consists of 2 phases. Phase 1 includes interior improvements, a cafe portion to sell ready-made food and non-alcoholic beverages, a lounge area where cannabis products purchased from the adjacent Satori Wellness dispensary can be consumed, weekly yoga classes, informational commercial cannabis vendor displays will also be periodically available. Phase 2 will be the installation of a commercial kitchen for food preparation and service and a menu of cannabis-infused entrees. The proposed signage would be double-sided without artificial lighting and located at the corners of both Nursery Way as well as on the corner of Nursery Way and Hartwood Drive, indicated with stars here. The property owner has consented to both signs. It's staff recommendation that the Planning Commission find the project exempt from environmental review pursuant to Section 15301, existing facilities, under the SECO guidelines, make all required findings for approval for the conditional use permit, adopt the resolution approving the conditional use permit subject to conditions of approval. Thanks, and I'm available for questions.
Hi.
Any question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the first that I recall of dealing with an on-site consumption. And my thinking is really bordering potentially outside what I perceive to be land use related. But my concern is that this is adjacent to a really dense residential neighborhood and right adjacent to the main thoroughfare of McKinleyville. And so I guess the discussion I wanted to have in public is having people utilizing cannabis products in this area potentially going to cause people to be tempted to drive away from this to get back to where they live. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily something that we've discussed, and I just wanted to understand how that's supposed to work.
That portion of it was not covered in their proposal, that particular facet.
Sure. If I could, our view on this was that it was very similar to other uses that would be permitted in that zone district, such as bars and restaurants. And those operators are expected, just as this one would be, to run their business in a way to ensure that that's not endangering the safety of the neighborhood. This area also is bordering on some residential areas to the south, so presumably you could have lots of those residents that live there, walking to this facility or perhaps riding their bike or something like that.
Would it be reasonable to have a condition of approval to ask that their operation plans have some sort of policy to identify patrons that may overindulge and make sure that they have a safe manner of transportation? Or is that beyond a land use discussion?
I would submit that's beyond the land use discussion.
Thank you.
Interesting question. Any other questions for staff before we open it up to public comment?
Dealing with that, is that covered in the state's permit? That's my question.
I don't have a clear answer on that. My speculation is that it's not similar to a bar. I mean, we don't regulate how much people can consume. There is a degree of personal responsibility that's associated with the freedoms that we have in this country.
There's got to be a regulation, just like the ABC for alcohol, for consumption of cannabis.
We're talking about overindulgence here. I don't know that the ABC regulates that.
I thought that our local jurisdiction that just opened up in the Time Standard building with those permits and stuff, the State Department of Cannabis, whatever.
Well, they will be required to get
Yeah.
a state permit, certainly. But again, the question is, does the state regulations or should local land use regulations regulate people's, what's normally associated with their personal responsibility?
And I'm thinking that it would be the state of California, which is like along the lines of alcohol consumption. It's a state amount there, so,
No,
thank you.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. I do think it's outside of our, it's outside of what we're supposed to deliberate on. It should be under state control. I do know that in many places, bar owners are required to physically take the keys of people who look like they are going to be basically DUI. I know the Bureau was talking about that. I don't believe that there is anything yet, and it is held back by a lack of a test. So the first test has now been developed in Canada because before it became legal at the federal level across the country, that was one of the conditions of the federal government, was that there had to be a reasonable DUI test before it went into effect. And so there is one out there, but to my knowledge, the state of California has not yet adopted it or developed their own. And so there wouldn't actually be a way to enforce that. And again, it wouldn't be something we would be able to add on anyway. But I do believe that it is a good point.
Mr. Chairman, I just want the record to reflect that I'm going to abstain from this item, not because I don't support it or recognize the limits of our jurisdiction, but because I live approximately 1,000 feet from this site, and I know that's not close enough to technically be a conflict of interest. I just don't want there to be an appearance of impropriety.
sounds good. No, I think you had some.
Well, I'm not opposed to this project, but I do think it's a good occasion, since it's the first one that I'm aware of that is authorizing a public consumption locale. I appreciate Commissioner Mitchell bringing up the safety concerns, and it's not a land use issue, that's true, but it does strike me that we ought to at least be addressing the question of whether by approving this we would be taking on some liability for the county. I mean, I don't think we would, because I'm not aware of the county being sued, for instance, when somebody gets drunk at a bar that has a county permit and then, kills somebody. But it seems to me that that's the nexus that, the county is entitled to make sure, is that we are not incurring liability, that whatever guidelines there are in place are the responsibility of the applicant, of the proprietor, and not ultimately of the permitting authority. And I suppose that's a question for county council.
What I will say to that is that we are regulating land use authority here, and the state does regulate the on-site consumption. They have permitting for that, and so we are deferring to the state in that area.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for staff? If not, I'm going to open up to public comment. Anybody'd like to speak on this issue, please come up. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Gino. I am the business administrator for this license. And, that was a great question. One of the things that we actually have been discussing lately is, how are we going to prevent that? How are we going to prevent, overconsumption? And we've been talking about, time limits. And also, Satori Wellness has security guards on site. So it's going to be super easy to go ahead and implement a SOP to have securities go into the cafe and, keep an eye for these things. But another thing that I did want to point out is the average age for our customers is about 35 to 40 years old. So these are hardworking individuals of the community that come to our shop and, want to purchase whatever it is to get medicated. And medicated doesn't always mean to, get high. And, that's not the type of culture, that's not the type of environment that we want to provide at our cafe. Thank you.
Brian Robinson, 355 River Bar Road, Fortuna, California. I wanted to say that I think that it's great that Humboldt County is opening the doors to these kind of businesses. Going forward, I think it's going to be very important for our local economy to bring in tourism, other assets that we can have from these jobs, and I really feel like Satori has been a great operator in the past. They've really helped the community. They've been a part of the community. I think that what they're trying to do here is awesome. I would definitely feel a lot safer as a member of the community having these kind of places in the metropolitan areas on the main drags, because those are the only areas where we do have access to Uber and we do have access to cabs. We're not going to have those necessarily like outside of the areas. So definitely this is the kind of area where we want these things. We want to make sure that it makes the community look good and brings in quality customers to our area, and I really think that this is the type of place we need. Thank you.
Hi there. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Craig Najedli. I'm the owner of the business here. And just to say that in terms of the limitations and what people can consume, it is kind of freedom of choice, but there are daily purchasing limits that the state has implemented. So a person can only purchase 8 grams of concentrate and 28 grams of flour. Granted, if you were to sit there and consume all that you can purchase in one day, you probably wouldn't be able to walk out the door. So there are those limits there, and our goal is to operate a very professional and well community-oriented establishment. And so we do have security in place to kind of monitor and make sure that everybody in the facility and around the facility is safe and well taken care of, because we're doing this for the community, and we are enabled also now with Uber and Lyft to be able to provide transportation if we see that that is a need, and to and from the airport or to and from to a safe location for people. So that's we're going to try and do it really well. But I know it's on a little uncharted territories in the county, and we look forward to hopefully being the first. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lillian Dubois, and I wanted to speak on consumption. I've been a part of this process for quite a while, and I've been a part of this community pretty much my whole life. And one of the biggest problems with legalization is that we don't have effective consumption. So we've created all these avenues for people to buy cannabis, to use cannabis, but we haven't created safe spaces for them actually to imbibe and learn how to use cannabis. So what we're doing, the city of Eureka is already taking this into consideration because they're building a big vet facility where there's going to be lots of patients needing to consume cannabis, yet they have nowhere to do it. So we're ending up with people on the streets, people in hotels, people going into places where they are violating law, but we're asking them to come here and utilize the plant. So as we develop consumption for this community, we're actually creating safe places for people to utilize this plant and educating on responsibility, meaning that less people will be in the streets of your neighborhood because they'll actually have a place to utilize the plant. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners, staff, Director Ford, County Counsel. Tara Carver, Executive Director, Humboldt County Growers Alliance, and we're here to strongly support this project. I can't echo strongly enough what Lelania just said. We have incentivized the safe products, but nowhere to actually go with them. I'm really proud of the city of Eureka. They're pushing this forward. I would love to see the county match that effort, and so that we're not just highly concentrating the experience of cannabis into Eureka, although they'll probably be mad at me for saying that. And I would also recommend moving forward with this so that our local parks, which tourists visit a lot, have access to consume and then go to, versus going to parks where children are at and whatnot, and others who don't want to be part of that, which is what we're seeing right now. So thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak on this issue? If not, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission. Any thoughts?
No, I have no objection to the project. I think it's a great project, and it is a wellness cafe, which is welcome here.
Would you like to make a motion?
Sure, I could follow that with a motion. Motion to approve the SWCO Satori Wellness Cafe and Lounge, application number PLN 2019-15348. To find the project exempt from environmental review pursuant to section 15301 of the state CEQA guidelines, make the required findings of approval of the conditional use permit, and those are subject to all of the recommended conditions.
I'll second that.
Any comment? Call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
And one abstention. Motion carries. So that moves us on to public hearings. The first one is the Goslin Final Map subdivision and special permit. We'll give staff a second to get set up. Go ahead, Trevor.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Trevor Esclow, the assigned planner on this project. The project before you tonight is a subdivision of an approximately 33-acre parcel into 6 parcels ranging in size between 5 and 7 acres. The parcel is currently developed with a primary residence and accessory dwelling unit, as well as a shop and other accessory buildings. The parcels will be served with water provided by the Palmer Creek Community Services District and on-site wastewater treatment systems. The project also includes a special permit to authorize work done under a valid building permit, but within the streamside management area. The project is located in the Tompkins Hill area, along Tompkins Hill Road between Palmer Creek Road and Hookton Road, near the Fortuna end of the road. The site is approximately 4,200 feet from the intersection of Palmer Creek Road and Tompkins Hill Road, and the first 600 feet of Tompkins Hill Road, which meets a road category 4 standard, with the remaining 3,800 feet to the project site meeting a category 3 standard. Because the property is located within the state responsibility area for fire protection, the subdivision is required to be accessed by a category 4 road. This would require approximately 3,800 feet of road improvements. In addition, the parcel has approximately 1,500 feet of frontage, which would also need to be improved to road category 4. The Department of Public Works has researched the ultimate build-out of the area and determined that off-site improvements were not required, provided the entire parcel frontage is improved to a road category 4 standard. This represents the applicant's fair share based on the proposed project. The applicant has stated that the cost of improving the road frontage would be cost prohibitive and has proposed installing an oversized turnout along the west side of Tompkins Hill Road. The turnout will be large enough to support heavy equipment transport and additional fire equipment in the event of an emergency. An exception request was submitted to CAL FIRE, and they approved this exception. With that exception, the applicant would convey secondary dwelling units on 5 of the 6 parcels. An exception request pursuant to our County Code Section 325-9 was also submitted to Public Works, requesting these same, or these road frontage improvements be reduced to just that above mentioned turnout. Department of Public Works has reviewed that request and stated they do not oppose the request. However, the Planning Commission must approve that exception. Therefore, the main issues, other than the standard required findings for approval, is whether or not the Commission can support the exception and make the required findings as stated in the applicant's exception request, which is located on page 58 of the staff report. So that's pretty much what I had. Here's another aerial view of the subdivision, a few slides of Tompkins Hill Road, and the tentative map. So I'll end my report, and I think Mr. Bronco's here as well if you have any questions on road improvements.
Any questions, Mike?
I just want to make sure, how many parcels maximum could be subdivided on this piece of property?
The 6 proposed.
6, okay. So 6 more, maybe 2 per property for vehicles going up that road, is that correct?
There are 2 dwellings, one, primary and accessory,
Right
which
now.
we cited on individual parcels, and then the one parcel that has the accessory dwelling unit could be developed with a larger primary, and then the other 4 could be developed with a main residence only. The applicant is conveying accessory dwelling units on 5 of those 6 parcels.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll open this up for public comment. Anybody have anything to say on this project? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Anybody care to make a motion on this one?
I just wanted to comment. I was a little concerned at first looking at the road conditions along there, just even from 2012 on Google. I've been along that road a few times, and after that first part there, it does get narrower and harder to get by, and especially with Palmer Creek, with the road going down the creek there a bit in different places, I can see the difficulty there. But with the limitation, I believe, on the amount of parcels that can be developed there, I don't believe that this would overdevelop and overuse that road. So I'm okay with the conditions that staff put upon here, which was on page 58, is that correct? Or no? Yes, the tentative map improvements exemption.
Correct. That is the applicant's exception request. Yes.
Yeah, request then. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It seems to me like the standard solution for this would be to widen the road, but instead they're going to put in a turnout. And in the case where we're adding, a few extra parcels. That seems reasonable to me, and there doesn't appear to be any public objection. So with that, I'd like to move that we adopt the mitigated negative declaration and make all the required findings for approval of the final map subdivision and special permit based on the evidence in the staff report, and adopt the resolution approving the Gosselin project subject to the recommended conditions.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Oh, sorry.
Just to be clear, the motion does include approving the exception request as presented? Excellent.
Yeah, that's not actually in the recommended motion, but it does inherently include that. Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second, but I think we have some comments, so.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge a supplemental that we received today from a gentleman named William Womack, who was a resident of Tompkins Hill Road, and he noted that he would have liked to be here to speak his concerns into the record, but he's not able to due to an injury. You know, I'm not going to read his whole letter, although he's asking that we do. But he is stating the concern that he and some other residents of the neighborhood have about the danger to current residents due to the increased traffic. However, from what he says here, I don't know that he understands that there are going to be as many limitations as there are on the additional residences of these parcels. For reasons that have already been expressed, I'm comfortable with the conditions that we're attaching and granting the exception. So,
Any other discussion? Nope. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? No. Motion carries. Second item, Michael Brosgart and Ariel Brosgart special permits. We'll give staff a second to get set up. There's a lot on this one. This one. Okay. You want me to take a break?
No, after the presentation.
Yeah. No. I'd rather do it while they're setting up.
There's
Yeah, let's just go.
Okay, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Caitlin Castellano, Planner 2, assigned planner to the proposed Glendale multi-use cannabis facility special permits at 1695 Glendale Drive. This multi-use facility aims to be a one-stop shop for processing, manufacturing, and distribution of local licensed cultivator product. The project proposes 28,000 square feet of new building footprints in 3 buildings. You'll see one in the top, middle, and bottom. That is the proposed site plan. It proposes 22,000 square feet of driveway and parking and 26,000 square feet of new landscaping to support the 4 requested special permits on a 1.7 acre parcel. The processing facility will include drying, curing, grading, trimming, packaging, located in a it's a 2-story building, approximately 20,000 square feet. That's the top building. They anticipate 10 employees for those activities. Next is the volatile extraction manufacturing is in the middle building, and they'll be utilizing butane, which is a hydrocarbon, in a closed loop, fully contained process within pre-manufactured booths and pods surrounded by reinforced concrete in the 5,400 square foot building. They do anticipate 3 employees for those activities. The next is the non-volatile extraction manufacturing. They will utilize ethanol and CO2 extraction in, again, a closed loop process, and they will include a commercial kitchen. And it is included in the bottom building, which is actually going to be shared with distribution. And then the distribution is in that same building, and it's for the intake storage of raw and processed materials and the distribution of finished product to retail dispensaries. Total employees would be 23. 38 parking spots would be provided. Hours of operation would be Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., closed Sundays and federally recognized holidays, and deliveries will be limited to Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. The project does have an extensive security plan proposed, including unauthorized access, prevention measures, theft and diversion measures, and video surveillance. So this is a map of the area with the proposed zoning that's consistent with the 2017 general plan. In yellow is the residential area. In gray is the industrial. Red is the commercial, and salmon is the mixed use. You can see the red parcel highlighted. That is where the proposed project is located. It is adjacent to the neighborhood. But the site's general plan land use designation is commercial service. Commercial service designations are intended for heavy commercial uses and compatible light industrial uses not serving day-to-day needs. And the type of business going in there would require a full range of urban services such as good access, public sewer and water, electricity, fire protection, and waste disposal, which this site is afforded. So the proposed cannabis project is consistent with this. Currently, the zoning of the whole entire area is actually zoned unclassified, but it is proposed to be rezoned to the commercial C2. Even if rezoned, the project is still consistent with the use. So I did want to point out that through the significant, public comments that we've received, there was a 2005 Glendale vision statement that was prepared as part of to help guide the 2017 general plan update land use designations. There was also a 2006 Fieldbrook Glendale community plan that the Community Services District helped prepare. Both those plans have not been adopted by the Board of Supervisors or the Planning Commission. So in your supplemental packet number 2, there was a letter stating that this project would absolutely divide and establish community when really it's consistent with the current zoning and proposed zoning. And additionally, when reading through the 2006 document, the project does seem consistent with it because the project's proposal is for redeveloping a vacant industrial site into a new state-of-the-art cannabis facility that plans to utilize solar energy, limit water usage, mitigate stormwater runoff, add landscaping, construct new sidewalk, and increase employment opportunities in the area.
Excuse me. Are those plans in our supplement here?
No, they are not.
Before you switch pages on that map, can you highlight for us?
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry,
No.
the previous map.
Yes.
Can you highlight for us, in relation to the parcel, where's the nearest body of water or stream? And how does that stream flow into the Mad River?
Sure. This is Hall Creek right here. Apologies, I don't have the streamside management area, Hall Creek following. So it is about, I think it's 700 and 800 feet to here. And then Hall Creek does flow into the Mad River on the other side of the freeway.
But just to be clear, that blue stripe that goes just below the parcel is not a stream.
No, that's a railway.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Melanie, then let's let her finish her presentation and save our questions for after.
Yeah, it's not a question. I just want to add a note to say that I did see in there that they had specified that they were going with the 100% renewable option with PG&E, but there were no mention of solar panels.
So I want to touch a little bit on the site's history. It was included in a much larger timber processing site, the McNamara, excuse me for saying that wrong, and People Lumber Mill. This site had a remedial action certification issued in 1998 by the California Department of Toxic Substance Control, and a Phase 2 environmental site assessment investigation was prepared in October 2003 and found no evidence of wood preservative chemicals or other hazardous materials at the site. Additionally, when the various contamination sites from EPA and DTSC and the Water Board, as well as the Cortese list, were checked in early December, it was not an active cleanup site. However, when the initial study mitigated negative declaration was noticed for public comment, we did receive pretty important comments from the Humboldt Bay Keeper as well as the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District, informing the planning department that the project parcel was included in a DTSC, which is Department of Toxic Substance Control, decertification letter that was dated December 28th, 2018. And due to the results of a 2017 groundwater monitoring report prepared for 1619 and 1678 Glendale Drive, I just want to point it out on this left map. It's this large parcel and this that they really focused on. The main contamination came, there's a cap right here, and then there was a new dip pond here.
And
so,
where's this site?
This site is sorry, it's really hard for you to see this.
Doing that right there.
Right here, it's underneath this tank right here. This is the site, but this note is pointing to this site right here. So our site is right here on this next map. A portion of it is right here and over, and then on this map, you can't see the site.
I just wanted to make sure I was getting that information correctly from you as to where this report is coming from and where it's pointing out where those wells are in the site.
Yeah, so the letter explained that the decertification was due to subsequent soil and groundwater investigations showing PCP and TCP impacted soil beneath the cap, like I said, was right here. It had mobilized from soil to groundwater as a result of a rise in groundwater elevation due to the previous timber operation not drawing significant amounts of water from the on-site wells. As a result of this, the Water District claims that this information is substantial evidence that a significant impact would occur as a result of the proposed project and that an EIR is required. The Humboldt Bay Keeper and the Water District comment letters have been addressed and are included in the staff report, as well as new letters included in Supplemental 1. The first Planning Commission hearing scheduled in June was continued to consider and address this information. And as a result, the applicant did contact DTSC early in June 2019 because he was not included in that letter. His title report did not show the land use covenant that was supposed to be attached to every parcel associated with this. So after he contacted them, they actually issued a letter a few weeks later on June 27th and concluded the property is not impacted by contaminated soil or groundwater.
And do we have that here in our packet?
Yes, it is in the packet.
What page is that?
I believe I looked it up, it's about 120 or something like that.
Staff report out.
Or maybe hold on a second.
The paper copy is 109.
Which I don't have it. So it would be in attachment 5.
Near the end of attachment 5. Yeah, it actually.
It is page 109.
Yeah, it is.
Director
page
report, thank you.
Yes.
So to address the potential for groundwater disturbance, a depth to groundwater assessment was completed by SHN on 8/2/19 at the request of the applicant and found groundwater was only encountered at one of 3 test sites. So groundwater was encountered at the far back of the site at approximately exactly 7.86 feet. There was no groundwater encountered in the middle and at the frontage. So as a result, the project is not expected to disturb groundwater during installation of water sewer lines, which were proposed to be up to 8 feet as proposed and analyzed in the ISMMD. Because the applicant's contractor, Pacific Builders, confirmed sewer and water connections will be designed to keep ground disturbance to a depth of 4 feet at the back of the parcel and falling to 8 feet towards the front. They need to go that deep for sewer. The recent DTSC letter and the results of the groundwater testing further documents that there is no likelihood of significant impacts, and so the MMD is appropriate. The comments received from Humboldt Baykeeper and the Water District were taken very seriously and are addressed in the staff report. The additional evidence indicates that there is no groundwater and soil contamination on site, and further that the project will not disturb groundwater. Therefore, there is no significant impact and does not change the conclusions of the ISMMD. Next, I'm going to talk about a project modification that resulted from noticing the ISMMD. We were informed that there was a bus stop for Greenpoint Elementary or Greenpoint School District, which is actually about 35 miles up to 99 in the Redwood Valley Chesum community. Previously, the project included 10,000 square feet of indoor cultivation as well as a wholesale nursery, and it did meet the setbacks for the Blue Lake Union School District. As you can see, here is where the bus stops are. And then these red lines show the distances underneath, but this school van does qualify as a school bus stop. So the applicant chose to remove the cultivation and modify it so it was so it could comply with the CMMLUO section 55.4.1D, which does require a setback of 600 feet for cultivation. And however, the processing facilities, since it's not pertinent to an on-premise cultivation operation, as well as the manufacturing and distribution, are not subject to the 600-foot setback requirement to a bus stop. Water and sewer will be provided by the Glendale Fieldbrook Community Services District. The applicant did obtain a will serve letter dated April 4th, 2019 that confirmed the capacity up to over 60,000 gallons a month, which did assume wastewater service would be requested. So removing the indoor and the nursery drastically decreased the water usage in half to approximately 30,000 a month, which is 1,000 a day. There was a follow-up phone call with the CSD who did confirm the capacity and the ability for both the water and wastewater services. Additionally, the project proposes to store spent wastewater into holding tanks and test prior to discharge to the system. So in your supplemental packet number 2, we did revise the conditions of approval to ensure that that testing is tracked and monitored and provided at the annual inspections. Also on this site, it does so it talks about the estimated water usage as well as employees on there, as well as estimated delivery trips for employees and deliveries. So I wanted to point out that according to the 2017 General Plan Revised EIR, the roadway, Glendale, is considered a major RDO collector, and also the level of service is A right now. So the county strives to keep a level of service above C. So the proposed project would not provide a significant impact to traffic. The next couple slides are just simply giving you a kind of on-the-ground view of the area. So this is looking east. The project site is the back left. That driveway is actually the adjacent parcel, but currently right now you have to use that driveway to get to the project site. This is looking west. The project site is on the right, just past the vegetation. That is a fairly large residential property. The house is in the very back. This is looking east past the site, that same residential site that's very vegetated, and the house is in the very back, as well as, industrial across the street. Here's a look at the, exit 4 on-ramp, off-ramp coming to Glendale Drive looking east. And next looking west, turn left to the exit 4 to get on Highway 299. And there's the market. So here are some schematics and elevations. You'll see the 2-story building would be the processing. The middle building is the volatile manufacturing, and the front building is the non-volatile manufacturing with commercial kitchen and distribution. So some conditions of approval, I'll just try to run through these quickly that address some of the community concerns. No cannabis shall be smoked, ingested, or otherwise consumed on the premises, and no loitering. The project is conditioned to have HVAC, mechanical odor mitigation. They are to construct a curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and the bike lane. If a bike lane is requested by Public Works and deemed appropriate during the encroachment permit process, that will be applied. There's required to do a landscaping and maintenance plan, native vegetation, making sure it's looks good, doesn't fall into disrepair. There'll be a required fencing plan, signage plan, lighting plan. All of these must be approved by the planning director and cannot distract or be a nuisance to the neighborhood. The project is conditioned to receive initial and continued written verification from the Division of Environmental Health, who administers the Certified Unified Program Agency, CUPA, which is charged with compliance inspections for facilities that handle, generate, or treat hazardous materials. And they require hazardous materials release response plans, inventory plans. They must follow California Accidental Release Program guidelines and hazardous waste generation and on-site treatment. The project will follow all state and local hazardous materials requirements and receive hydrocarbon-based solvents only from license, which is the butane, from licensed vendors as dedicated and at dedicated loading docks with spill containment kits. They are required to contact or post their contact information on site, as well as make it available to the neighborhood, mail it 300 feet around the neighborhood, mail it to the sheriff's department. Also to point out, there was a condition in there that should they get complaints, they have 10 days to resolve those complaints. And there is a process for appeal to revoke the permit. The project is also conditioned to only use exit 4, so personnel and deliveries can only use the exit 4, Glendale, near that industrial site. They cannot use the exit 5 for the city of Blue Lake and Glendale Drive and take the long route. So, and also they are required to purchase renewable energy. I apologize if in the staff report that didn't talk about solar, but it is my understanding that they are proposing solar on all available rooftops. And if that is not enough, then they will be, no matter what, it's renewable energy. So with that, staff does recommend that you adopt the cannabis facility mitigated negative declaration, make the required findings for approval of the 4 special permits, and adopt the 4 resolutions approving the special permits, subject to the conditions of approval. Available for questions. Thank you.
Go ahead, Brian.
Can you pull up the site plan one more time and review for us the volatile extraction processes in relation to the residential neighborhood and what type of setback we have between the 2 uses?
Sure. So there is, let's see, actually, I have a really hard time seeing up here. Let me get So there is it is definitely over 30 feet, and it looks like 50 feet actually between the property line and the volatile manufacturing facility that will be surrounded by reinforced concrete. In your packet, there are example manufacturing pods that are specifically made for this, that are explosion proof and can contain the hazardous materials should anything go wrong. The machines, there is example machines in the packet that are specifically made for this. But basically, they're going to have a pod that'll have 2 booths in it and in a pre-manufactured, like shipping container like thing inside the building in the middle that's surrounded by reinforced concrete. And it is over 50 feet from the property line, but I know that's not very much, but there are lots of security measures. Cliff, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, if I could, that the nearest residence is immediately to the east. So that's about 50 feet from that property line. The next nearest residences would be on the north, over 100 feet from that building.
Here, let me go. Oh, I can't zoom in on that. So there is a residence about right here, which is actually, so it's not directly adjacent to it's actually like behind the processing facility, not the volatile manufacturing. And then the other residence is behind the processing facility. So really the residences are currently next to where the proposed processing facility would be in the back.
Go ahead, Mike. So looking at this, staying with that questioning, I'm looking at the schematic and I see a building A and a building B.
Yes. So building A is, I believe, the
Two-story?
processing. Yeah, the 2-story. Building B is the middle building.
Because it's labeled on here as nursery.
Yeah, so if you're looking at the Omsburg and Preston one, that was the
big
yes,
one right
that's the original site plan when it had the commercial nursery and cultivation. We kind of included that to show you there should be exact setbacks on there. Licensed surveyor prepared that map, so we thought it might be appropriate to include it. But really, the one you want to focus on is
the next page 29, which
yeah.
is the smaller
Yes.
look that you had up on the screen.
Yes.
Which shows building A there at the back, and it's 2 floors processing.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's about 20,000 square feet for both the first and second floor.
Go ahead, Noah. Thank you. I just wanted to ask you about, we received by email a few hours before the meeting a revised version of the ISMND, and the email that it came with said that it had been updated to include a lot more information. I have not really had a chance to look at that document yet. I don't know if it's available in hard copy for...
I can clarify what happened.
Yeah.
So there was really minor changes to the ISMMD. When we got comments back from the CDFA Cal Cannabis, they requested some corrections to the tribal cultural resource section, as well as who were responsible agencies, which is actually in their introduction. So that's the only revisions that we made, was we corrected an inconsistency with the tribal cultural resource section, as well as the agencies listing Cal Cannabis and the Bureau of Cannabis. And then they attached those, so the one you got was correct, but it missed the attachments, which were on the original one. So.
It missed the attachments. Which one missed the attachments?
So the one you were first sent, that was correct. It just didn't have the attachments.
I see.
And the attachments were the site plans and maps, as well as the California Natural Diversity Database information. So really, the MMD is almost the same as the one that got routed, but it included some minor additions to add some state agencies, as well as correct the tribal cultural resources issues.
Through the chair, if I could just add, the only revisions to the ISMND were made to address comments that CDFA had asked us to do, because what will happen in this process is that if this project is approved and this environmental document is adopted, CDFA will actually use that document for their state permitting process. So they asked us to just reference some of the state agencies in that document to make it easier for their permitting process. Those are the only changes that were made.
Okay.
The document that was circulated.
Okay, thanks. And just to be clear then, the one that was circulated earlier and made available to the public, it did have the attachments, it just didn't include these minor corrections that CDFA had requested.
Correct. And it is still up on the State Clearinghouse website for viewing.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? So I'm going to open this up for public comment, but first we are going to take a 10-minute recess. I've had a request for a bathroom break, so we'll take 10 minutes, then we'll come back and have public comment. Ready to go? All right. So let's open this up for public comment. Try to keep it to 3 minutes. Looks like there's a lot of people that want to speak.
I'm Tony Lucchese from Pacific Builders. I live at 4747 Jacoby Creek Road in Bayside. We at Pacific Builders have worked with Michael Rosegard on his project for 2 years now. During that entire time, I found him to demonstrate concern for the community, concern for the environment. I think Humboldt County would be darn lucky to have him. My short statement. I think one thing to keep in mind here is that the concern that's been raised around groundwater, after seeing the SHN study, the level of groundwater as a builder, I can say that I can't imagine any scenario where we're going to get down to groundwater in the construction of this project. So I think that I encourage you to listen to the report and see that I, as a builder at least, feel very comfortable about that. And also, I think this is an excellent use of an old mill site. These mill sites were typically land that was used hard, and this is a chance for a rebirth for this piece of property and to do something productive and bring some good jobs into Humboldt County. So I'm here in 100% support of the project. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Lelania Dubois. I grew up in Burnt Ranch. I went to Hoopa High School. I was a nursing student at CR. I am now the owner of a local publication, and I'm also a human rights commissioner. I happen to be the one who originally started this permit project. Originally, I had 3 local cannabis people on those permits with me. Sorry, I'm really nervous. This is like 5 years of my life. 3 community members who very quickly tried to push me out of the project in not very nice ways. Michael was invited by someone to look at my project. Michael was shown this opportunity, and he decided that developing this project was worth his expertise. Michael has a history of commercial development and helping brands develop into a larger marketplace. As a single disabled mother, I found too many hurdles coming up against me to see this project through on my own. Sorry. Michael is the person who ensured this project was done right. He hired the same people we were working with. You just heard Pacific Builders. They actually came onto this project out of the goodness of their heart and with no payment for me before Michael came on. Michael guaranteed that they got paid. Working with me did not do that. He is the one that hired Brittany Crosby, who did all this amazing work that you're looking at. So we had all our I's and dotted and our T's crossed. He was the one that was able to put more money into the project when regulations changed and when the neighbors asked for special conditions. He did all this with zero hesitation. He believed in us, meaning myself and Brittany, after we had been impacted negatively by our local community. He believes in Humboldt. Our community is not faring well through legalization. The market is wanting added value products. In fact, that's where communities make money, is off added value products. We need projects like this to help us be a part of the new marketplace. We have more single moms like Brittany and myself who need jobs and the opportunity to build their visions. This project has the ability to empower the community around it, as well as be a big part of helping Humboldt County gain true sustainability through this new legal industry. Michael is not any of the bigs that we're all afraid of. In fact, he's been a good friend, and he's just a family guy who knows how to do business right. As a leader in this industry locally and nationally, I can promise you we need a lot more Michaels here helping us. Humboldt has been impacted by this new global industry more than any other community in the world. We should be leaders who do good business with other leaders. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Brian Robinson, Fortuna, California. I just wanted to say, as a member of the community, seeing the pictures, seeing staff report, number one, I think the staff report was great. The level of cleanup and what this site is going to look at compared to a run-down old mill site that is blight. This is beautiful. I see landscaping. I see wonderful hardscaping. I see jobs just galore building this thing out. It's awesome. And I think the big question is it zoned for this? Is that in our plan? And if that is the case, it should be treated like any other business to be zoned within that area and given this permit, especially with all of the dollars and time and effort that's been given into a project such as this. I think that that's really the big thing. And I really need this. As a grower myself, I have nothing to do with this project, but as a grower, I see the need within our community for this, because a lot of our cultivation sites, we don't have handicap restrooms, we don't have processing facilities, we don't have these available to us out in the hills, but we do need these, and having these in areas that are close to the freeways and areas that are safe is very important for the workers as well, and I think that this is perfect for what we need. Thank you.
Hello, chamber members. Thank you for letting me speak today. I'm definitely in favor of this. Oh, bring it down. I'm definitely in. Oh, that's much better. Definitely in favor of this project. My name is Robert Schultz. I'm a property owner in that area and a business owner in the area where this proposed facility is. I'm happy to see this project finally put through. I've been waiting for this. This is a wonderful time in Humboldt's history, something that took a long time to come. The renovation of these old mill sites are essential for our growth in Humboldt County. It's about moving forward with the times. These projects will provide so many jobs, these needed jobs for the area that we have to have for our growth. Look at Arcata Cannabis Zone. It's doing wonderfully. The rest of Humboldt County deserves this as well. We all deserve to build the future of our children in our county. Cannabis is it, just as logging and fishing once was. I would like to address the environmental issue. I have spoken to Nicole, who runs DTSC, and I think that the general opinion of her and her staff is that they want to see these mill sites renovated and move forward. We did not create these spills. We didn't create this environmental problem, but we're the only ones that are going to move forward with these sites, fix these sites, and have these sites usable for our county so that we can have the jobs that we need and have these areas cleaned up for the residents. As a community, we're going to have more opportunity to include the residents in the things that we do and provide more awareness of cannabis through these projects. Thank you.
Chair Bongio, Planning Commissioners, my name is Ryan Plotz. I'm District Counsel for the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District. I'm speaking this evening to reassert the district's opposition to the current proposal to approve an MND for this project. The district's principal objective is to ensure and protect high-quality water supply for 88,000 residents of Humboldt County. The district is seriously concerned that the project construction and operation will result in contaminated soils and groundwater flowing into the nearby Hull Creek, which flows into the Mad River and ultimately into the district's downstream intake wells. As staff noted in their presentation, in 1994, the Department of Toxic Substances Control issued a remedial action plan for the former timber processing site. In December 2018, the remedial action certification was rescinded on the basis that soil and groundwater investigations since 2002 have revealed that soil and groundwater contamination at the site is not under control, and the implemented remedial actions are no longer protective of human health and the environment. In particular, since 2002, groundwater levels rose approximately 15 feet, beginning when the mill shut off an on-site well. Thus, groundwater was able to come into contact with PCP and TCP contaminated soil, and that contamination mobilized through the groundwater. As a result, PCP concentrations have skyrocketed above the maximum contaminant levels at groundwater monitoring wells following the release of the 2003 Phase 2 data, which is the same Phase 2 data that the applicant and the county staff rely upon for the use of the MND. Staff recommends approval of the proposed MND on the basis that DTSC issued a letter on June 27, 2019, stating that the subject property is not impacted by PCP contaminated soil or groundwater. Reliance on the June 27 DTSC letter is flawed and inappropriate to support the MND. First, the DTSC letter should not be given any substantive weight because the DTSC relies upon the stale soil samples taken from the subject site as part of the 2003 Phase 2. As a general matter, it is wholly inappropriate to rely on 16-year-old Phase 2 soil data. A Phase 2 assessment is good for only 1 year. A 16-year-old Phase 2 would never be accepted by DTSC as a basis for avoiding liability for a contaminated site, so it makes no sense for DTSC to rely on that data to say that there's no contamination here and now. Second, as applied to this particular site, it is unreasonable to rely on the 16-year-old data in light of the subsequent data collected from the monitoring wells and soil samples taken on the adjacent property since 2003. In conversation with DTSC representatives just yesterday, the DTSC described the June 27 letter as, quote, ambivalent as to whether the project site is contaminated and acknowledged that the situation was, quote unquote, sticky. The county should not give any deference to DTSC's faulty logic based on stale information, especially in light of what is at stake if the site is contaminated and those contaminants are disturbed during construction. One more point and then I'll conclude. It's our understanding that additional sampling at the old mill site was taking place on August 22nd, and that the lab results from those tests have not been made available to DTSC. At minimum, the commission should delay approval of the project site until that data is available. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Barbara Russell from Glendale. I live a few houses down from this site. And so 3 things. One, if the water table has risen so much, and it's up, it's just 8 feet below the surface, how far down are sewer pipes? And then if it raises a few feet up, then it's just gonna head downstream, so. Okay, so that's one thing that is important. And then the other thing is that Glendale is very important to, Glendale is very important to the community, because it not only does it serve Glendale, it also serves Philbrook and Blue Lake. And we need the community commercial zoning that this lot is proposed to be. And that does serve day-to-day needs. We need those community services and the housing that this lot could provide. This lot is able to subdivide into small lots where the owners of the businesses could have their businesses downstairs and they could have their residents upstairs and rentals upstairs, and then we would have small businesses and services that could serve our area that we need. And so it's just a really important lot, more than just, the cannabis people need their place to do their stuff, and I wish them well, but our community, this lot is right in the center of our community. And, well, I guess that's it for now, so. The third thing is, so we ask, okay, so there were some findings in Calaveras County from the appeals court 1982 Calaveras County, and 1984 Santa Cruz County, when it was people versus the planning commissions or their county there, because they allowed special permits on properties before a valid general plan was finalized. And so we very much ask that you don't allow special permits in our area until our community plan is completed and we have a completed and valid general plan for our county. So thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Natasha Lee Fisher, and I've actually written in before and talked to a few on the Planning Commission. And our property is located, I don't know if you can move that to the bus stops. Okay, so off to the left is Blue Lake School, and that's my child's bus stop. And then off to the north, for North, it's actually Greenpoint School, my child's best friend lives there. And so she rides her bike, and they do it multiple times a day. They actually did it today. Rode from the Glendale bus stop of the Blue, and then goes directly in front of the proposed cannabis facility and up and around, up Swanson and to her friend's house. So I'm just giving you a general idea that there are residents to the north directly and to the east and to the west. There's not just me there. There's neighbor houses on either side, so we're about 600 feet from the Brosgart proposal. It's not what I ever expected to invade us in our community and to actually, I feel, to ruin our neighborhood. There's plenty of places in Humboldt County to put this where it is not right next door to us. Just recently, there was an armed robbery of a cannabis facility. Operations such as this attract a certain segment of the population that are up to no good. Those are my opinions. Is this what our Measure Z dollars are going to be used for? I'm concerned about odors and noise. Without an odor ordinance, noise ordinance, or nightlight ordinance, these facilities can do whatever they want. How is the county ever going to ensure that all the marijuana brought in is legitimate? These operators don't really have a good track record of following the law. I'm concerned with all the children who will see these facilities be confronted daily with the availability of marijuana, become comfortable with it, and may turn into future customers. There hasn't been any long-term studies of the effect of marijuana on the body. There isn't anything in this industry that makes me happy, and I prefer that if you're going to go about doing it, to relegate it to the back rooms in the North 40, not in plain sight where it will have negative effects on families. The mitigated negative declaration report is prepared for and may be paid for by the applicants. Of course, it says it won't have any significant negative impact in our community. Whether people want to admit it or not, this is part of the drug trade and culture that you want to move smack into the middle of Glendale. What is going to allow this proposal to be approved is the can't see it from my house attitude, and approval will be in spite of objections of the we who live here. I have the same can't see it from my house, but I'm not suggesting it to be in someone else's backyard. Places like the old Oryx sawmill site or the Samoa Peninsula, someplace where it won't be a problem. Please not in the middle of Glendale.
Thank you. Please try to keep it to the 3 minutes. I'm trying to be lenient, but we got a lot of people that want to speak.
Hello, I'm Jim Redelius. I first came to Humboldt County in 1960, and more or less I've lived here ever since. And for about 40 years, not quite 40 years, I was employed by the forest industry, and I lived near, and I still live near Glendale. So obviously I'm not opposed to industry. I worked for the industry for a long time, and in fact I still consult with them. My concern, and I haven't heard much of concern until this young lady just talked, is for the people of Glendale. I received a letter from this commission, I assume it came from this commission, that alarmed me when I read the description of the facility they proposed to build. Sounded like a military bunker to me, in that they have to have concrete, steel reinforced concrete surrounding this building to make it safe. That's unbelievable to me. I can't believe you would even consider, let alone issue a permit for such a thing when it's next to those buildings. You can see the houses there. And I guess the other thing I was very concerned about is just what the lady said. I've been here working in the industry for that long, and I've been driving through Glendale every day for the last 40 or 50 years. And it's a peaceful, quiet, beautiful place. Nothing, I don't know of any kind of criminal activity there at all. Similarly, until a couple of years ago, maybe even less than 2 years ago, the Corblex area just outside of Arcata, where the cannabis industry has taken over, that was all industry, timber industry. And for all those years, to my knowledge, there was never any kind of criminal activity there. At least if there was, I never heard about it. But there's already been one armed robbery, and I'm wondering when the next one's going to occur, and when are the people in Glendale going to have to put up with that? Thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, if you want my letter, I can leave them with you.
It's up to you.
Thank you.
My name's Dave Trobitz. I've lived in this area for about 62 of my 70 years, and I'm just kind of around the corner there a little bit, and I've certainly been upset about, I just kind of wonder, we're not against what's going on, we're just against the location. And the location's bad. One thing that people haven't mentioned is that we have a herd of about 80 to 90 elk that kind of roam around there. We've got the school buses going back and forth, and I think it's naive to think that people can be told that, well, when you come out to the road, turn left. I mean, people are going to go right. And as far as doing due diligence, I think it would be good for the board to drive Glendale Drive from Blue Lake all the way where it comes out in Essex Lane. I mean, it's a very, very narrow road, and there are certainly a lot of problems there. And what was said today, we have our security there, but what does that do for the people outside? You know, I mean, they might be secure because they have a security detail, but how about the neighbors? And this is a beautiful community. It's in one of the little publications it said that this was not really a community, but it is. And I could look at each one of you and say, would you want this within, yards of your house? I don't think so. So I would really like people to do due diligence on what to do on this situation. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm Claire McAdams. My family owns a roughly 1,200 acre timber property just north of this. I would just like to draw your attention again, if you can imagine, the photos that you saw were of Glendale Drive proper, right there at a certain intersection or two. What you're not seeing is all those houses, all the forest property, the TPZ. You're not seeing the 15 years worth of coho salmon restoration efforts by the feds and the state Department of Fish and Wildlife. You're not seeing from those pictures the fact that the Glendale, the store, the Murphy Market, function as a community hub, informal but very real. There is a community there and has been for decades. My great-grandparents knew that there was, and there still is. In fact, it's grown a lot. So just know that the photos you saw don't show you the whole picture. When I'm listening to this case and the cases earlier that have to do with cannabis-related facilities, and I'm picking up, I'm hearing lots of talk about our community and the community, and that's a wonderful and glorious thing, but I remind you that there are multiple communities, and a lot of the people do not have the same value system, and they're trying to do things like raise families, keep wildlife in play, in our case, we don't want the public inside our working forest because it's a fire risk. There's a lot going on there that you just don't see. So I would urge you, but the biggest thing is that the Board of Supervisors last January this year, 2019, gave us permission to do a Glendale Blue Lake community plan and promised the staffer to help us do it. That's been delayed. I'd urge you to hold off on this decision until that process happens and is complete, and invite the applicant to be part of that process. Thank you.
I guess I'm next. My name is Cindy Trobitz Thomas. I'm a longtime resident of the Glendale area. Over the years, I've witnessed the changes and impacts to the community, and I'm concerned over the impact this project you are considering tonight. In previous letters and testimonies, I've covered a multitude of different issues or things that I was concerned about, but I wanted to highlight several key ones tonight. The first one is the land use planning section of the initial study. A finding has been made that the project will not physically divide an established community, and there is no established community on the site or adjacent areas, which is completely false. The proposed site is surrounded on 3 sides by long established residents. In addition, Murphy's Market, which is the icon in the community, serves Blue Lake, Glendale, Corbell, and West End Road, and portions of Fieldbrook, and is home to the long-established E&O bowling alley. Glendale is a community. It is not just a non-residential, barren community area. Secondly, hopefully the Commission is aware of the Board of Supervisors plays a hold on rezoning within the Glendale Community Planning Area until the Glendale Community Plan can be prepared. The impetus of the board action was an outcry from the community regarding the proposed zoning that would have facilitated cannabis projects. The community planning effort has not progressed as the months go by. Cannabis projects for this area continue to be brought forward and supported by the county, and there is no mention anywhere in the initial study or staff report of this community planning effort. Third, as far as transportation, in the initial study, it said that the project would have no significant impact on Glendale, the traffic. Has traffic study been conducted to determine if there is less than significant impact? If so, did the study include what type of traffic, i.e. heavy industrial trucks, cars, bicycles, visibility, inadequate shoulder? I won't walk on Glendale Drive because there is no place to go. A few times I've tried to walk just between my neighbor's house and my house, and there's no way to get away from the trucks and everything that are going along. I've asked the county to brush the road. They've done a portion of it, but there is no shoulder. It's and they haven't completed it all. In 2008, there was a report done on Glendale and determined that the road was in fair condition. There has been no road work done in 11 years, and characterizing Glendale Drive as being in fair condition is extremely generous. There has been no work that has happened in that amount of time, and I'll hurry up. And basically, it's been mentioned about the elk, and I do think we need to look at the cumulative. If all 6 of those projects have been completed, what's that going to do to the area? And finally, property and business owners deserve an opportunity to have input regarding the future of its investments and community. Please honor the Board of Supervisors moratorium on rezoning Glendale until we can have our new community plan completed.
Thank
I didn't think it was that long. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Michelle Kiley, and I live in Arcata. I've sat here and I've listened to the other people speak about this issue. I work indirectly with the cannabis industry. Back in about a year ago, I was laid off. I did have training in your track and trace program, and I found a niche in the community. I work with the industry to help them become legalized. Excuse me, I'm nervous as well. I used to work before that previously in the wine and spirits industry, and that is heavily regulated both federally and statewide. Laurier Jacks, in fact, came from that industry. Cannabis is more regulated than that industry. It takes 3 agencies to basically regulate them. The concerns here are being addressed by each of the cannabis businesses. I know this because I work with them, and I try to help them and assist them. A little background for me is I moved here in 2002 because my husband was terminally ill. And when we got here, we didn't know it, we lost our medicine. The only people that helped me were the farmers. And if you shut down this, they're not gonna have places to go. Okay, you want this to be a legal industry, then you need to help them. It is not their fault that previous industries that were there polluted the land, so to speak, okay? They're trying to mitigate these issues and bring it forward. I understand and I hear about the community, but I came from an area where if you want growth, you have to move forward, not backward. I find it a little hypocritical that you can say that you can build businesses on the floor and apartments above. That would disturb more ground than anything. I just feel that this project needs to move forward for the betterment. I mean, it will bring revenues to the area. Each issue can be addressed. They will have sidewalks. They said that they would install sidewalks. I mean, the cannabis industry, there's a lot of people that you don't know in your community that do work in the industry. There's such huge stigma associated with this industry, and I think that we need to move forward and bring it out of the dark. Thank you.
Hello, David Bridge. So full disclosure, I know Lele, known her for a while. She's a fantastic person. She leads this industry in being an exemplar person for what we want to do right in Humboldt County and throughout. A couple of things I wanted to touch on. One, we got another dilapidated mill site, hasn't been used. I look at this picture, I see blight. I see kids walking by blight. I see elk walking through blight, right? There's problems with this area. I see a project which has the offer of cleaning up the blight. It has been given an A when we strive for a C. In general, the cannabis industry, when it comes into an area, it lowers crime. Part of that is due to the increased security and the increased monitoring. Other things of value don't have that same protection, like jewelry stores. We're not concerned about jewelry stores coming into our neighborhoods. Similarly, other places like gas stations in McKinleyville seem to have more problems with security than others. We don't have problems with gas stations coming into our communities. These guys have a plan for how to deal with the security. We should allow them to implement it. I don't see any problems with this as a project. I see more than excessive mitigation for volatile materials, for setbacks, for everything that's been asked of them. They're willing to go the extra mile to make this happen and to bring jobs to this community, 23 jobs from the look of it. So for me, what you're not gonna see from these pictures is the work that's been done in the back, on your side, on the side of Lele and the people that have been doing this work to get this to a point where they could pick a good site and do a good job of presenting something to you guys that should be able to work. And I appreciate your guys listening to me, and ladies, and I appreciate the work of the planning department in bringing this forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, nice to see babies at a planning commission hearing.
Yes, it is.
My name's Jennifer Kalt. I'm the director of Humboldt Baykeeper, and I apologize for not responding to the DTSC letter from July, but we did not know it was in existence until Saturday. So the 1989 document that DTSC relies on to determine that pentachlorophenol was not used on the site also concluded that groundwater has not been contaminated at the McNamara and Peat Mill site. We know that to be inaccurate. The remedial cap has been decertified, and the plume has moved towards the Mad River, which has been noted as above our drinking water supply for 88,000 people. The aerial extent of that contamination has not been identified, as the attorney for the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District stated, and groundwater has risen at least 15 feet from since the time that the sampling was done in 2003. There was a mill building on this subject property that, well, I would have shown you a diagram if I'd have written comments, but I didn't get a chance to do that. There was a mill building that was part of the McNamara and Peat Mill. And that mill building was adjacent to the planer chain building, which was used to spray pentachlorophenol. And then to the west of that was the green chain building where the two dip tanks were. In 1981, the dip tank was moved south of Glendale Drive to that building that you see in the bottom of the image there. And the 2003 Phase 2 clearly shows the entire subject parcel as lumber storage area. The way the soil would be contaminated is that the lumber would be dipped into the penta, then it would be planed and then sprayed with penta, and it would be stored where over on the subject parcel where the penta would drip all over the soil. That's how the soil and the groundwater got contaminated with dioxins. This is a top priority of Humboldt Baykeeper, so if you have any questions about penta and dioxins, I could probably hopefully answer them. But really important is that no dioxin sampling has been done in the soil on this property at all. And these sites need to be tested for dioxins, not just pentachlorophenol. Just as you would test old buildings for lead and asbestos, every lumber mill site in this county needs to be tested for dioxins. Part of the reason for that is that pentachlorophenol has a short half-life. In 2003, the Simpson Plywood Mill in Eureka also tested non-detect for pentachlorophenol. Baykeeper's experts sampled for dioxins and found tens of thousands of times the levels of dioxins that are considered to be safe by the US EPA. Just one quick thing that I want to wrap up with is there's going to be stormwater capture areas to slow down and filter water on this property. And those are going to run right into Hall Creek and into the Mad River. And those aren't on any diagrams or anything. If that soil is contaminated with dioxins, that's going to carry right into our drinking water supply. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening, Planning Commissioners, Director, County Council, and staff. Tara Carver, Executive Director of the Humboldt County Growers Alliance. During public comment on both Ordinance 1 and 2.0, there was overwhelming support to mitigate the environmental impacts of cannabis processing on our rural farms. With strong support from nearly all stakeholders, industrial and commercial properties were deemed the appropriate sites for this activity. This has incentivized the rebirth of economically depressed industrial and commercial areas in Humboldt that were left in despair from decades of timber use. But with a significant catch, are these sites clean enough? Which brings us to Humboldt Baykeeper's concerns. Baykeeper has raised the possibility that contaminated groundwater from elsewhere on the former lumber mill site may have migrated on parcel 64 where the proposed project is located. Although the Phase 2 review in 2003 found no PCP or TCP contamination on parcel 64, Baykeeper suggests that older measurements may now be outdated, and there's a potential that groundwater could be contaminated and potentially migrating to other areas. The issue at stake here is very complex and very technical and requires consideration from experts. That said, in our review of the staff report, there are a few specific issues that we would like to highlight for the Commission's consideration. First, based on the staff report, it appears to us that the development of this property will not be intensive enough to reach the water table. A groundwater study from August 2nd, 2019 estimates the water depth at several points on parcel 64. The study found that groundwater at a depth of 7.86 feet at the northern parcel line and did not detect groundwater at the southern or eastern parcel lines. According to the staff report, the contractor, Pacific Builders, has confirmed that all disturbance within the northern parcel line will only extend 4 feet, falling well short of the water table at 7.86 feet. As the parcel moves south, the disturbed zone will gradually move from 8 feet. But by this point, no groundwater is detectable on that part of the parcel. But more broadly, what we're discussing here tonight isn't a concern about this particular project. It's a concern about any project that might be developed in the area. If groundwater from contaminated parcels is migrating to other parcels, this should be a concern for any potential development, including non-industrial uses like envisioned housing or schools, as well as any maintenance on existing uses such as homes or commercial businesses such as a market and bowling alley that may impact groundwater. Environmental impact should be an equal concern for any project developed in the area, and cannabis should not be held to discriminatory standards for issues that are applicable to all forms of development. In addition, we respectfully ask that your commission look at this project objectively and without bias, and not let it become a victim to the very politically charged, decades-old general plan update war that has raged in our community for way too long. Thank you for your consideration tonight.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brittany Crosby. I have been working on this project with Michael Brosgart and Lelania and a couple of other locals beforehand. I came on this project as an agent. The gentleman originally asked me if I knew how to do operation manuals, and it turns out I ended up doing all of the site plans, the layouts, the drafting, and the SOPs. So I know a little bit about this project. And I know from my little bit of experience in Humboldt County, I've only been here since 2013, that there is a space in the industry that there's a gap. And when I first got here, I trimmed once. It was terrible. It was the worst job ever. And I knew that that's definitely not the area that I wanted to be in. But by working for some of these women and men, I saw a gap in the regulations where they couldn't process their own things and make their own medicine with the property and the homes that they currently had. And with the way that the market shifted and changed, they also couldn't afford to do that, but they were already in the process. And before I even met Michael and the group and knew about this project, I had a business plan in mind for basically a commercial cannabis kitchen. And the only thing that the law lacked to support that was the shared use. Now the state has shared use. So there's not only a processing facility where everyone from the off the 299 there coming in with their product, it's a great area for them just to be able to come in, get their things processed. If they're already legal with their products, then they can have a shared use license and use it in the manufacturing space and be able to actually make their medicine or their products and get it to the public. So when this project came into my lap and I got a chance to look at it, I knew that it definitely had a purpose and it would be good. I know the community is concerned about it. I understand that. I am a mother. I have 2 small children. But I also was a general contractor in Florida, a realtor. I had a yoga studio too. But I wouldn't feel any fear living next to this facility. I would prefer to drive by a nicer quasi-state-of-the-art building looking nice than that. So that's just my personal experience. Again, I'm from Florida. So this is a very different world for me, but I'd like to thank Michael and the community that I met and this project for bringing me in, because it has absolutely opened the door to have a community here. And thank you. That's it. Appreciate it.
Good evening, Commissioners and Chairman Bongio. My name is Michael Brogart. I'll be speaking today on behalf of myself and my wife, Ariel Brogart, who is actually in the audience tonight with our young daughter. She's one of the loud ones over there. We are the owners of the property at 1695 Glendale, as well as the applicants for the 4 permits. I'd like to start by thanking the Planning Commission and the commissioners for hearing this project today. I'd also like to thank the Planning Department, who have been a huge help throughout this 2+ year process. I know how much work they have put into developing a responsible framework for cannabis development in the county, and I truly think the work they are doing will set a positive example for future developments in Humboldt, as well as the rest of the state. It's challenging and can take a long time, but at the end of the day, it is being done right. In addition to real estate development and brand building, I have worked professionally in cannabis for the last 3 years on the investment side, as well as in hardware and packaged goods. Through those endeavors, I've formed relationships with many cultivators, brands, and processors, and I've seen the need firsthand for the types of services that this project aims to provide. From processing and packaged dried cannabis to craft extraction and other value-added derivatives of the plant, these types of services are needed to support the many compliant cultivators in the county. Humboldt has long been a leader for all things cannabis, from its genetics to the expertise of the professionals involved. Market research predicts that the legal cannabis market in just the U.S. alone will be $50 billion by 2023, and I think that Humboldt can capture a large piece of that pie. This will generate jobs, tax revenue, and be a real and true economic driver of the county for many years to come. I was very fortunate to be connected with Lelania Dubois, who first had the vision for this land and project. You guys heard from her earlier. She is also a passionate human rights advocate and active member of this community. What attracted me to this specific parcel was not only the zoning and location, but that a significant Phase 2 study had already been completed and determined that the land was free of contamination. It is also fully paved and primed for development with 3-phase power already installed by PG&E. There were no covenants on the land. In short, it was a clean site that makes sense legally, geographically, and logistically for this type of facility. Following my purchase of the land, I conducted an in-depth CEQA review, which served as the foundation for the mitigated negative declaration that I received earlier this year. There are concerns from the community regarding the project's intended use, as well as the effects of development on this parcel. I hope that everyone can see that we do not take these concerns lightly, as this is your home and your community. We have made many concessions and have revised the project to address the concerns from the community, such as eliminating indoor cultivation, establishing strict odor control systems, and adding beautiful landscaping to make it aesthetically pleasing, much nicer than what is currently existing on the site. We have also gone to great lengths to ensure this project will not disturb the water table or spread any contamination from the nearby former lumber mill site. In June, I met with Mark Piros from the Department of Toxic and Substance Control, the California state agency that regulates contaminated land in California. Today, Mark is the unit chief, but in 1998, coincidentally, he headed the remediation of this former lumber mill site. Mark is intimately aware of this location and issued and signed the letter stating that my parcel is not contaminated or affected by any nearby contamination, nor was it ever. And as you have already heard earlier, together with SHN and Pacific Builders, we have taken steps to ensure that the project will not disturb the groundwater. Ariel and I would like everyone to know that we are committed to this community. Throughout this process, our partners have all been local. From Philip Lapotre, our architect, to Brittany Crosby, who has been instrumental in working with the planning department, Nick and Tony Lucchesi from Pacific Builders, Lelania Dubois, who manage community relations, SHN on the engineering front, and HCGA, who are committed to growing this legal industry in Humboldt. This project will also provide over 30 full-time jobs, and we hope to have many people from the Glendale community as employees at this facility. My family will also be relocating to the area, and we look forward to becoming part of this community. In closing, we hope that when completed, 1695 Glendale will be a model for what a successful cannabis business can be when done responsibly, sustainably, and with local support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hold on a second.
Thank you very much for your comments. I did have a follow-up question. It was alluded to by a previous public speaker that there were some more recently performed either soil samples or groundwater samples that were conducted on the site. And I just wondered if you cared to comment on whether or not that was an accurate statement and whether or not that information could be made available to the Planning Commission.
I'm not sure what statement you're referring to. A few weeks ago, or about a month ago, we did perform tests with SHN to determine the level of the groundwater, which you guys have seen in the presentation from the planning department, which is shown to the depths that we'll be going to not disturb the land. Furthermore, in the letter released in December from the Department of Toxic and Substance Control, where they were testing areas around there, the area where we have did not show any contamination.
If I could, through the chair, just to clarify, what the previous speaker was referring to is that the Department of Toxic Substance Control did go out and do additional sampling of the site adjacent to this property just recently as part of their continuing monitoring of this situation. And so they did not test this site because, as they've referenced in that letter, they don't have concerns that this site is contaminated, but they are monitoring, and the recent testing they did are related to the known contamination that is immediately to the west, approximately 200 feet from the project site would be the nearest monitoring well that they're looking at.
So that's it for the speaker. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
Commissioners, my name is Fred Chrisman. I'm an anthropology professor at HSU, and I'm affiliated with the Humboldt Institute for Interdisciplinary Marijuana Research. I've been living on farms for the last 4 seasons, particularly focusing on the processing, the post-harvest work at trim scenes, which definitely can use some improvement, as we all know. Furthermore, I was a co-author on 2 reports funded by the Department of Public Health on the effects of proposed regulations on the manufacturing industry in the state of California. And so I'm rather intimately knowledgeable about how the regulations and, in my opinion, the overregulation of the industry has led to the current debacle we have, in which the black market continues to proceed apace, and the state, the county, and the cities are getting much less revenues than they'd hoped to get. I cannot speak to this particular facility because I just found out about this meeting and about this facility today. So I leave it to the reports that have been done and the expert testimony on both sides. Instead, as an anthropologist who studies cultures, I want to comment briefly on what I find dismayingly to be the continued legacy of the global war on drugs and the neo-reefer madness that continues to persist. The notion, for example, that the cannabis industry will lead to increased crime and lawlessness and negatively affect residents and local community members. There is virtually no data supporting this for the post-legalization era. And in fact, as others have spoken to, increased security and regulatory activity has generally assured confidence and security for the community. So I just hope that, as others have stated, as you look at this project, and then as the Board of Supervisors, I assume, looks at it, that they will take into account both sides of this equation and realize that if we want Humboldt County to be a premier location for a new industry, for the cannabis industry, we need to welcome them here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, John.
At the end of public testimony, we would ask for a 5-minute recess. There are some things that we want to respond to, and I'd just like to make sure that we have our response correct.
Okay. So is there any more public comment? If not, I'll close that, and then you'd like to take 5 minutes now? Okay, let's take another 5-minute break.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Johnson and Ms. Castellano to begin responding to some things, and then I'm going to respond to a couple things.
Okay.
Thank you. Through the chair, One of the primary things that has come up here, and I think one of the main issues, is the contamination of the adjacent property. And so what I wanted to try to show show the commission, if you can turn to, I'm not sure about the page, but it's in attachment 7. There is the.
Is it that stuff right there?
It is that there, yeah. It's
So
got
this is
really-
the supplement that came out. Supplement information number 1, page 27, 28, 29.
I just wanted to clarify that it's actually in there twice, because the water district submitted it in May, so it is in the public comments attachment, and then they resubmitted it again. So luckily, it is easier to find in the supplemental.
So, you know, we are relying on the phase 2 that was done, that did soil testing, that did not find PCP or TCP on the site. So I think the issue here is the risk of contaminated groundwater that may be on the site. This is why this figure here, which is the one on the far right of that slide, which you have a better copy of in your report, is very important, because this was the 2017 groundwater monitoring that DTSC did. And this is what they relied on to actually decertify the remedial action on the contaminated site here. So the nearest groundwater well, monitoring well, I should say, to the property, to the project that we're talking about right now, is monitoring well 11, which is right at the bottom right of this site. That's approximately 200 feet from where this project would take place. And in 2017, that monitoring well did not test above the maximum concentrated load for TCP. It tested slightly above the maximum concentrated load for PCP at 1.9 micrograms per liter. If you look at the some of the other
Excuse me,
wells,
can I
yes.
just ask you real quick here, that monitoring well 11 that you're talking about is to the west of the site?
Correct. That is approximately 200 feet to the west of the project site.
So can you kind of point it out on the middle one there? Right on the right border, yeah. And where is that monitoring well 11 on that slide? Okay, yes.
Okay, so, you know, for context, some of the other monitoring wells here that are closer to the cap are as high as 570 micrograms per liter of PCP. So the one at the monitoring well 11, which is the one closest to the site and still 200 feet away approximately, was 1.9 micrograms per liter in 2017. So again, the concern seems to be groundwater that would have flowed, you know, that would have contaminated this site, because we do know from the 2003 phase 2 that they did not find any PCP or TCP on the site. So if groundwater is going to be disturbed, that may be a concern if there's contaminated groundwater on the site. That's why the groundwater testing that they did recently is so important, because that does show that they can develop the site and not disturb the groundwater. So while we think that there is no contaminated groundwater on the site, and we're positive that there's no soil contamination on the site, even if the groundwater was contaminated, they have shown that they can develop this project without disturbing that. So I wanted to make sure that the commission understood that, which I also wanted to respond to a comment that was made that they had reached out to the Department of Toxic Substances Control, and they had said that the letter was very ambiguous, I think, and what was the other word that they used? That it's a sticky situation. I want to be clear, I contacted the Department of Toxic Substances Control after we received that letter and talked to the person who was responsible for writing that. They did not, that is not the impression I got. They were pretty clear with me that they do not believe there is any soil or groundwater contamination on the site.
Is that the June 27th, 2019 letter you're referring to?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
So again, I don't know who that person contacted, but I did contact the person responsible for that letter. And the impression I got was quite a bit different. Additionally, we did want to respond to some concerns about runoff on the property. And it's really important to note that right now the site is entirely paved. So the property's running off already into the right-of-way and then potentially flowing down towards Hall Creek, where it could eventually flow into the Mad River. As part of this project, they are proposing to develop stormwater infiltration. So all of the stormwater on the site is going to run into that and be filtered. They're also going to be required to provide water filtration for the proposed parking lot that they have. So all of that stormwater should be contained on site and filtered before it goes back into hopefully the ground. So addressing those two concerns, let's see, was there anything else on the stormwater? And I believe those were actually the two concerns I really wanted to address and have the commission fully understand.
John?
Thank you, and I just have a couple of things that I would like to respond to. Is that concerns were expressed about traffic, and the reason there wasn't a traffic study done is that this is a Category 4 road. It is paved. It operates at level of service A, which is the highest level of service that a roadway can operate at, and this project would not affect that. And so normally when you would require a traffic study is when there is a concern about the level of traffic being put onto the road and changing the level of service. That is not the concern here. Secondarily, there were a number of comments made relative to the Board of Supervisors imposing a moratorium on rezones. And so the board did not impose a moratorium. What the board said is that they didn't want to be rezoning property that were in community plan areas until the community plans were completed. And so that process is ongoing. Unfortunately, getting the text amendments that the Planning Commission reviewed, I think now earlier in the year, were just completed at the board level. We're now moving into the mapping changes, and then we'll be moving into the community plan area work. So that is a little bit behind schedule. But it's very important to understand the commitment by the board was not to stop processing permits. And as was pointed out by staff, this project is consistent with the land use of the 2017 general plan. It's consistent with the existing zoning and what would probably be the zoning once it's adopted for this particular location. And this is not maybe directly applicable, but I think it bears understanding is that it was the deep concern of the Planning Commission when 2.0 was adopted to not change the standards under which applicants were processing their permits. This is a 1.0 application. And so to change the standards by which applications are being processed now would really be inconsistent with that statement that was applied to 2.0, which is that applications that were filed before January 1st of 2017 shall continue to be processed in compliance with the standards that were in effect at that time. And so that is exactly the process that's being followed here. I think it's important for the commission to weigh in this particular case is that there has been statements made that there's a reasonable argument that there's a significant adverse impact or potential significant adverse impact to the environment, and so therefore an EIR must be prepared. I think what staff has responded with is information that responds to the concerns, i.e. what's the status of the soil on site? The status of the soil on site is there has been a phase 2 analysis. The phase 2 analysis was clean. There is concern with the groundwater in the area, absolutely. There is concern that perhaps the groundwater in the area is beginning to encounter other contaminated soils. But the question isn't, is that happening out there? The question is will this project somehow affect that in such a way that it either releases it, creates an adverse impact or somehow affects that in a detrimental way. What the applicant has actually done in looking at this is they've prepared sampling, they've designed their project so that they've demonstrated that they're not going to encounter groundwater with any of the grading or work that they're doing. And so we believe that the comments that have been raised have been adequately addressed with the facts on the record. And so therefore, the finding of the initial study mitigated negative declaration can be upheld. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Brian, you were first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I would tend to agree with you that you've addressed most of the major concerns that have been raised, but there's one that I haven't heard addressed yet, and I'd like to discuss the merits of the concern as it's been raised, and if there are ways to either confirm whether this is a legitimate concern or mitigate it, assuming that it may be a possibility, a way to mitigate any impacts on the environment. And that's the issue of dioxin contamination. I don't remember reading about dioxins when I read the phase 2, and is it your impression that dioxins were ruled out as a possibility in the soil or not? And if those weren't addressed at that time, and we've subsequently found out that those may be present, are there ways that we can mitigate the soil disturbance such that any such contamination could be prevented from getting in the groundwater?
So the recent 2017 testing did focus primarily on groundwater, and then the phase 3 was focused on contaminants that would have resulted from the processes that they used at the time. So our phase 3, if it's not including the dioxins.
Phase 2, do you mean?
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
yes, the
thank you.
phase 2. Then we are assuming that it was not used on site if they did not test for it.
So the thing, if dioxin is part of the PCP, that was tested as part of the phase 2, and that was not shown as occurring on the site.
Sorry, may I?
Go ahead.
My understanding, admittedly informed by Baykeeper, but I do think that they have a point here, is that dioxin needs to be tested for separately, that it's possible due to PCP's half-life to test a site where PCP containing dioxin was used and not find PCP, but indeed to find elevated dioxin. And the very fact that it does have a much longer half-life is what makes it actually the more dangerous toxin. So, I don't know why they wouldn't have tested for it in the phase 2 in 2003. It may be that our understanding of the science and the chemistry of the substances has evolved since then. But, I just want to echo, I agree with Commissioner Mitchell, and I appreciate the work that's gone into this. I really think we can and want to approve this project, but I'll just take the opportunity to say, we did, with good reason, incentivize redeveloping these old mill sites. And I think I have no question in my mind that Glendale as a community will actually benefit from seeing a blighted, rundown former mill site turned into an attractive, state-of-the-art facility that employs a number of people. But whether it is a cannabis processing facility, a new grocery store, a new housing development, any such development on this site, I feel like should undertake this additional safeguard, because that's the known risk that comes with developing a site like this, and particularly because even if it seems circumstantially like unlikely to be contaminated, I feel like the location of this site, just upstream or near to the water courses that provide water to thousands of people, behooves us to go the extra step. I would, like us to make this sort of a condition standard for redeveloping these sites, whether it is for a new mill, a cannabis facility, housing, or whatever. And, my understanding is that it could be done at a cost that is not prohibitive, given the overall cost of testing and planning that's already gone into this project.
So my question to the director and staff is on a couple of other things, the possible cumulative impacts on the community there and where the other permittees are in the community of Glendale that was expressed in Cindy Trobit Thomas' letter on page 2. Are there 9 applications with 1 approved, 2 closed but not used or complete, and 6 active right now?
I'm going to attempt to point them out with my pointer, mouse pointer. Am I seeing it? Are you seeing it? Oh, there it is. Okay. So there's the proposed project right here. There is a proposed cannabis project on these 2 parcels. There is a proposed cannabis project on this parcel. There was a proposed cannabis project on, I think it's this one. There is one on this one as well. And then the approved project is off the screen on the other side of Glendale Drive, and it's 10,000 square feet of mixed light cultivation. But these ones over here, this one would include indoor cultivation with processing manufacturing. This one was fairly large with indoor cultivation. They're all kind of vertically integrated. And then the one closest to the market would be, I think, a commercial nursery.
So with that, part of the question as well is with what's been brought up tonight about the groundwater contamination moving and that, are any of those permits possibly in danger of seeing that sort of problem?
I think,
like the one down below here.
I think we need to treat them all similarly and make sure that they are not exacerbating a potential groundwater contamination problem.
And they're aware of that?
I don't think the others have quite reached the level of readiness to move forward that certainly this one is at the Planning Commission, but we will certainly have those discussions with them as we get into preparation of the environmental documents and the things that need to be addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Melanie, you have a question?
Yes. Just to thank the Planning Department for that additional information. That was really helpful. Thank you. As a biologist and someone who cares very much about the maintenance of ecosystem services such as clean water, I took a lot of time to go through this, and what I think that the main issue here is being overlooked. So there are 3 main issues, if you like, here. One is the morality, and morality is a social thing, and unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you view it, for a mitigated negative declaration or a negative declaration, we're not supposed to look at the socioeconomic effects under the CEQA. And so there's that. And then we get to the other 2, which are the pre-implementation or construction phase effects that may or may not be significant and therefore impacts. And then we have the implementation phase, or the ongoing, run of the business effects. And it seems to me that we have enough evidence here to show that there will not be construction phase effects in terms of the groundwater. And so I think it's immaterial to discuss whether there is dioxin or there isn't, if we're fairly certain, which we have reports saying we should be, that nothing is going to go into the groundwater anyway. I mean, we have those assurances. So why are we even talking about that? unless we don't trust the reports. So then we get to the ongoing, or what we call the implementation phase. And that's where my concerns are, because if there are contaminants in the soil, then why aren't we there right now? I mean, whether there's a cannabis business or any other business there, I mean, these are just sitting there in the soil. And so every time it rains, it's going to be an issue. Not to the groundwater, but to runoff. That's the real issue here. We've already established there's no groundwater issue. The real issue is a runoff issue. And now we have to ask ourselves, are we going to hold this particular project to a very high standard where we say we haven't asked this of any other business to look at what happens every time it rains in terms of runoff? I think we should. Not to just this business, but to all of them. In fact, I think it should be part of what we do with public money. This is our drinking water supply. Why aren't we out there testing to see what's going into our drinking water supply? Why are we laying this on cannabis operations? I mean, it's ridiculous. It really is. We should be testing this on our own if this is our important drinking water supply. And so I don't see why we should not approve what is actually a really great project that provides a lot of employment to our area and is going to improve the area over an issue that has nothing to do with CEQA or this project. It has to do with a runoff issue that we should be addressing with public money because it's our drinking water supply. And so my question to staff, as regards to this project, and again, I don't think I wouldn't be in a position to disapprove this project because of this, but I am curious to know, because they, again, like all cannabis businesses, they're going above and beyond in terms of the regulation. What you mentioned that there are going to be explained things in place to capture or filter the water for stormwater, for runoff. And because that is the big issue here, and again, it's an issue it should have been an issue 10 years ago, 20 years ago. We should be out there now. It has nothing to do really with this particular project per se. It should be every project, but I would like to know, since we are holding these businesses to such a high standard, what is the filtration proposed? Because as many people know, and I'm sure Baykeeper can attest to, some filtration methods are more successful than others. And so why don't we just talk about what filtration method we're going to use here, and then maybe look at maybe doing that for everything else out there that goes into our drinking water supply. Thank you.
Do you want to were you asking them to give a response? So would you like to respond to that now? And then I have a question.
Well, the referral response from the Department of Public Works Land Use would require that the stormwater runoff from the parking lot and building site go through an oil water filtration system before it is piped to the sidewalk. Now, the applicant does also propose a detention basin to catch it and infiltrate it that way, but as far as specifics, filtering out specific contaminants, there is no proposal.
So, I mean, if you probably gleaned from that, what that means is that will be active and passive filtration. The active filtration will pick up the oil and the grit will separate that from the water before it's released. That is an active system. The passive portion of the system is running it through basically a landscaped detention basin where it goes in there and is basically diverted into the ground rather than as surface flow. There's two components to that. It stops sedimentation. It also minimizes flooding.
Thank you.
So Melanie hit on just about every point I was going to hit on except for one. I'm not exactly sure how to tackle this, but Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District. I've only seen them come to meetings twice, and the last one was another cannabis project just down the road that was Mercer Frazier's. And it seems strange to me that in 15 years of being a board director at Humboldt Community Service District, I've never had Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District come and speak to us about all these problems in Glendale, which is just above their Ranny Wells. So I'm a little concerned why that is. I'm concerned why we haven't heard about this before. I'm concerned why it only came up when there's cannabis projects involved. And I've always felt they never said anything back when we were doing the cannabis ordinances and didn't have any discussion about where the water really is coming from and up in the hills and the damage that is probably hundreds of times fold of what this project could even possibly do. And I just don't, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If they're so concerned about the water, how come we're only finding out about now when there's cannabis? It just seems ironic, the timing. I'd love to see them have more outcry about this just to make sure that the water's safe, because they supply the majority of the water in Humboldt County. So that's all I have to say.
I do have just a quick question, actually. Do we have any way to ask someone at the county to be going out there and checking on this in terms of surface contamination, and not just this particular site, but just generally the areas that are going into our drinking water supply?
We currently do not have a program or a funding source to address that. If that is a concern of the commission, that is something that the commission could certainly put together a letter to the board and indicate that that's something that needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It's kind of on that note. I really don't feel entirely comfortable putting the burden of this concern entirely on this applicant, when I think this is a really well-conceived, designed, and executed project. And after all, you know, they have relied on the county's own determination that an EIR was not necessary, that a Phase 2 site assessment was not warranted at the current time. And, you know, of course, they've also relied on the recent letter from the County Toxic Substance Control Department. But that said, you know, the risk of repeating what I said before, I really do feel like an additional degree of safety and certainty is warranted because of this property, not because of the cannabis-related nature of the activity. I'm frankly more than satisfied that their use of volatile as well as non-volatile processing and that goes above and beyond the safety concerns that I have about that. It is strictly the legacy contamination or potential for contamination that I'm not personally satisfied has been tested for. With all due respect, Melanie, and I'm not an expert on this either, but I'm not satisfied that dioxins should not be a concern on this site, because it's a somewhat different issue than what has been tested for. So, and this, I'm sympathetic to your point, though, that I kind of feel that the county has some obligation to facilitate, underwrite, help fund, or whatever this testing, precisely because it is really in the community's interest to see these old legacy mill sites redeveloped. And specifically with regard to this ordinance, the cannabis ordinance, we I think quite intentionally, have designated those sites as being, in many cases, the most appropriate for these types of cannabis manufacturing facilities. So I personally would like us to approve this project with that added condition. But even in floating that idea, I'm a little bit uncomfortable not knowing quite what that additional testing would cost. I'm a little bit uncomfortable putting that entirely on the applicant when I feel that it could be perhaps a shared responsibility, given that we have all these other sites within the vicinity of this mill that are coming up for, new projects and new developments.
Director Ford.
Yeah, I would just be very cautious about going too far down a road where the county is responsible for every old mill site within the county.
Sure.
If you want to bankrupt the county,
No,
step
no, no.
number one.
I take your point.
Yeah. But I would submit for your consideration that if the dioxin is something that is the deal breaker for one or more of the commissioners, then it would make sense to continue this item to allow soil sampling to be done, to bring back that report to either indicate that the soil is free of dioxin or it's not. And if it's not, obviously cleanup is necessary, and that's a different discussion. But if it is clean, then it confirms everything that we think to be true, and then it may put the commission in a different place for consideration of this project.
Okay, thanks.
So I wanted to make sure something is out there correct. Department of Toxic Substances is a state agency, not a county, for this cleanup that has issued the bill of health, so to speak, on this parcel. State agency has a degree of having to make sure that what they're saying is true at this time. And I think we've got a lot of due diligence done here that shows me that the site will be better than what it is right now, and it will be made whole as much as it can be, and it will be put to good use. My other part, question-wise or comment, is about the other applicants that are coming up as to how far along they are with their permits. Is there any time frame on any of those others? Will they be behind the Glendale community planning meetings and all of that, or what's the projection on some of those?
So the Glendale planning would probably be before the end of the year. Do you anticipate seeing any of those come forward before that time?
Okay.
That's good.
Well, I'd like to move approval.
Wait, Melanie had a question. I'm sorry.
I just had a quick comment. I think that Commissioner Levy might have misunderstood one of the points I was making, which was that the report showed that nothing was going to go into the groundwater because the construction activities are not going to access the groundwater. And so it's immaterial whether the dioxin is there or not if it's in terms of the groundwater, because we've already been shown that the construction activities are not going to allow anything to go into the groundwater. So really it's an issue of surface contamination, which is a completely different area, and we have not even addressed this for any other project.
Now back to you, Mike.
Okay. So I'd like to make a motion to find the commission has considered the mitigated negative declaration and make all the required findings for approval of the special permits, which are noted above on the case there, based on evidence in the staff report, and adopt the resolutions approving the proposed Michael Brosgart and Ariel Brosgart Glendale Cannabis Facility special permit, subject to the recommended conditions.
1 second.
Yeah, thank you. I
Director
just
Forrest.
wanted to clarify some language. The recommendation of the staff report is incorrect. You read it correctly, but it's to adopt the mitigated negative declaration.
To adopt.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Well, the director floated the possibility that if any of us do have unresolved concerns about the possible impacts either to groundwater or surface runoff from disturbing soil that is contaminated, that we could try to dispense with that question by requiring there to be dioxin testing done before approving, or as a condition of approval, I suppose. Is there any appetite for that?
Well, I personally have a real reservation with that. I agree with the director. I think you're going down a slippery slope. And what is the next thing? Somebody wants to do a housing project someplace. We're going to say, well, there was an old something there. Maybe we should make them, just make it to where it's so cost prohibitive, you'll never get anything done. And I can't see it on this project. I mean, I think each one should come to us as its own project. And maybe on those other ones, it'll show that those wells, are there. But this one, it showed that it didn't. So I think it should be on an individual basis.
I guess I would be potentially interested in discussing an additional mitigation measure that would assume that there were some level of dioxin contamination and just ensure, and maybe these are already captured, and what she's saying is that they are, that if there was dioxins in the soil, that we would make assurances that those dioxins would not end up in surface water runoff. It sounds like you're comfortable with that, and I'm not an expert in this area, but I do hear the concerns, and I don't feel fully comfortable just passing it without making sure that it's addressed. And I think your comments, Director, confused me, because it sounded like you said if we tested for it and there was dioxins, then we would have to remediate before doing this project. And it sounds like Melanie's comfortable that even if they were contaminated, that we would capture it through the groundwater filtration system. So I don't know if you can answer that question, whether I'm way off base, but.
Yeah, there's two different issues. So one is infiltration into the groundwater supply, and that has been shown through all of the reports done to not be the case here. The activities are not going to force anything down into the groundwater. So what is possible here is that there's surface contamination. And again, we don't ask any of other applicants. We've never done this for housing, for anything else, to be testing this. I mean, this is happening right now into our drinking water supply. I think we should be, but it would be prohibitively expensive. And so the applicant has already said that they will be filtering the runoff and stormwater. That's a different thing, right? That's more surface water. And so I was asking, well, what is that filtration? And it's a bit of an unknown, to be honest. So I'm going on the assumption that it's going to work. I'm hopeful that it will. We don't know exactly what the filtration methods are. We had some explanation from the director. It sounds good. There's not a lot of studies out there actually to show one way or another whether it's going to be effective for dioxins. But what it comes down to for me is that I would like to have this be asked of every project in terms of filtering stormwater and runoff if we do have contamination everywhere out there. I don't think it's fair to ask this particular applicant if we have no history of asking anyone else to do it. That was the point I was making.
Go ahead, John.
I would say that it's not that we never ask it of anybody else. That's why we do the phase one and then the phase two. I think in fairness, one of the things that has been raised is whether or not there's absolute clarity relative to the dioxin issue. The dioxin was not tested for in the phase two that we have. So perhaps one of the things that could be offered is a new condition of approval that would say something to the effect, prior to issuance of any building or grading permits, the applicant shall conduct soil sampling of the site for the presence of dioxins. If the results of the testing show that there is dioxin in the soil, a remediation plan shall be developed and approved by the Planning and Building Department and implemented as part of the project.
Brian?
Just to test the will of the applicant and the commission, would the applicant have any interest in voluntarily accepting that additional condition of approval?
Please come up to the mic if you're going to, it's recorded for television. Yeah.
It's hard for me to answer that just because I don't know how much it's going to cost. I've already spent a lot of money developing this project, you know, to the tune of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and have continued to expend money on this project. So I can't accept to that right now without knowing what that covers and what that means. I think we've done a lot of due diligence on this project to even be at this stage here where I'm talking in front of you guys. So I can't accept it because I just don't know what it means at this stage. So that's my.
Thank you.
I'd like to respond to that. I think that it's a little late to be changing the game. They came in, they asked what they had to do, they did all those things. The testing's been done to the satisfaction, and now we're asking more questions. Maybe on future projects, we should. Maybe this is the one that makes us do that. But I think being in the development industry, I understand what it takes to get to this stage, and he's not lying about what he's saying he had to do. I just think that it's not fair to, at the 11th hour, throw that on him. So that's my opinion. Did you have another? I thought you were. Any more discussion?
I just want to say I totally hear your point. It isn't really fair. I don't think they have done anything wrong. Indeed, I think they have gone above and beyond what could have been expected of them. To my mind, the question of whether we impose that as a condition now simply arises from the presence of information that came to light well along in the process of getting through the approval process. And should we, as a department, have done a better job maybe of airing some of these issues earlier, given that it is an old mill site? I think that's quite possibly true. But I think it has been a learning case for me and for maybe all of us about some of the questions that we need to be asking earlier in the process. I don't know that I hear enough support from the rest of the commission. I personally would feel much more comfortable voting for this project if we added a condition such as what Director Ford posited.
Any more discussion on that?
I would just say that while I intend to continue to support the project without it, I would feel more comfortable with it. And in this case, it shows that while it's possible to have scientific reports that say one thing, it's still reasonably possible that at the time those were done, almost 20 years ago, that they weren't with the latest, thinking in terms of what things should be sampled for. But given the preponderance of the evidence, I will support the project.
So we have a motion and a second on the table. Is there any interest in amending that motion? No. In that case, I'm going to call for the question. Those in favor of approving this project?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Regretfully, no.
Motion carries. Thank you for all your input.
Good discussion.
All right, one last one. Let's see if we can get this. It's the Rocky Costa conditional use permit. set a precedent that, I mean, and then my industry gets blamed if there's no affordable housing. I mean, I'm sick of hearing that it's my fault.
All right. Good evening, Commissioners. Tonight, I will provide an overview of a proposed conditional use permit for new unenclosed cannabis cultivation in the Blue Lake Community Planning Area. The 2.0 ordinance requires all zoning clearances under 1.0 within a community planning area to be located within 600 feet from residences and residential zones, or either enclose their cultivation and implement odor mitigation or request a special permit or conditional use permit, depending on public controversy. The applicant for this proposed project, Mr. Rocky Costa, cannot meet that 600-foot setback. And due to the residence located to the west, and he does not wish to enclose his cultivation. Given the public controversy, he has requested a conditional use permit.
A what?
A conditional use permit. Here we have the project in red. Like I said, it's in the Blue Lake Community Planning Area. The project is accessed by Warren Creek Road down here. Here we have Mad River and the 299 on the east side of the parcel. The project proposes for 8,000 square feet of new mixed light cultivation and 2,000 square feet of new outdoor cannabis cultivation. The water source is rainwater catchment and dry farming. Power is provided by PG&E. Here's the applicant's proposal plot plan. The project mainly consists of 5 greenhouses up here. The access road is Warren Creek off West End Road. The site is located at the very end of Warren Creek Road. This slide here with the pictures shows portions of the road that are problematic. The road does not currently function adequately for existing traffic, for commercial traffic that might be associated with this project. There are narrow points and there are areas with limited sight distance. A road evaluation report was requested in June 28, 2019 to be prepared by a qualified engineer to identify what improvements, if any, could be done to accommodate the proposed commercial traffic. The applicant subsequently called the planning staff and communicated that he would not hire an engineer to have a road evaluation report prepared unless if he knew that his conditional use permit will allow unenclosed cultivation. On August 2nd, 2019, county staff emailed the applicant stating that without a road evaluation report prepared by an engineer, staff would not be able to make the findings for approval. Specifically here, the importance of 312-17.1.4 that states that in order to approve the conditional use permit, the proposed development and conditions under which it may be maintained will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare. Without an analysis to determine what improvements, if any, could be done to ensure that the road is safe, this finding cannot be made. Therefore, staff recommends denial for this project based on the inability to make the required findings for approval in section 312-17.1.4 of the Humboldt County Code. The supplemental before you are 8 opposing letter, excuse me. The supplemental before you are 8 opposing letters from residents on Warren Creek Road who testify that Warren Creek Road does not meet the commercial and fire standards. Staff recommends that we find the project exempt from environmental review and from the state CEQA guidelines, section 15270, and adopt a resolution making the required findings for denial and denying the conditional use permit. And if you have any questions, I can take them now.
Any questions of staff? John, you have?
I do want to say something. We, staff and I did meet with the applicant after the staff report went out and explained the needs of the road study. They were having some health-related appointments down in the Bay Area and were unable to address some things. So while we believe that it can't be approved without doing the road analysis, we would recommend that you hear from the public, hear from the applicant tonight. And if the applicant is willing to provide the necessary information, you, as an alternative, you could continue the item to allow them to provide the necessary information.
Does the applicant want us to continue it?
I will allow the applicant to speak to their desires.
If I could just add, one of the things here is that I believe the applicant, who'll speak for himself, has suggested that he would go, take that step and hire somebody to prepare the road evaluation to see what could be done. But he wants to know that the conditional use permit will be able to be approved to allow him to do the unenclosed cultivation. And one of the key things here, because they're in this community plan area, is that if they do not enclose their cultivation and employ odor control, there is they need to get approval of the conditional use permit because it allows the neighborhood to raise objections based on the perceived and actual odor issues from the cultivation if it's not enclosed. And so the issue here is, would this be able to be approved even if the road was not an issue? And I think that's really what the applicant is asking.
Any questions? Go ahead, Mike.
So on the enclosure, the requirement for that, that's what is being required on all grows. This is a 1.0 going to 2.0 or what? Where's the status?
This is a 1.0 application. And what 2.0 did is it required all 1.0 zoning clearance certificates to meet specific standards relative to odor control. That's that they have to be either 600 feet or more away from nearby residences or residential zones, or they need to enclose with odor control, or they need to go through a discretionary permit process to gauge the public opposition.
Okay. So, and this one is, has residences within 600 feet, is that correct?
That is correct. There is one residence within 600 feet.
Any other questions?
Do we have any examples of where similarly situated projects have met a lot of public controversy?
The 2.0 ordinance allowed for applicants under 1.0 to, they needed to identify for us what path they wanted to pursue. But it gave them until the end of this year to seek approval of that. And that could be through going through a discretionary permit or choosing to enclose. We have not had very many people who have chosen to pursue the discretionary permit when they knew there was going to be public opposition. This is the first one that the Planning Commission has seen in this case.
Thank you. So we don't know, there's no precedent then. We don't know what, this would be the first example.
That is correct.
Any other questions? And then I'll open it up to public comment so we can hear from the applicant. If none, we'll open up to public comment. If the applicant would like to address us, feel free.
Rocky Costa, the applicant, and I asked to be able to have my greenhouses open so the air can flow through it. You guys ask people to grow. I mean, my place is an prime ag. There's a big, huge farm. Paul Gintoli has a big dry farm next to me. Crystal Ortiz has a big dry farms down in Holmes Flat. There's lots of residents around there. I don't know what they're actually zoned, but it used to be like a 200 or 300 foot, and then they raised it to 600. My neighbor's about 500 feet. They hadn't griped about any smell before. The property's been grown. If somebody is to enclose them and put in fans and dehumidifiers and filters, you might as well grow indoor. You know, I'm trying to do it as ecologically as I can. I'm going to dry farm. I want the sun to come and hit my plants and grow for medicine. And they asked me to spend a bunch of money on the road engineer. And, you know, my wife's had a lot of some cancer issues and stuff the last few years. And it's just hard to come up with a bunch of money to throw out as that if I can't grow it. So I asked for the special permit to be able to do open air. You know, I think my neighbors would probably complain more if I put big fans. One of my good friends is next to Honeydew Farms, and that's his only gripe. He listened to fans all night long. And I think my neighbors would gripe more if I enclosed it. And I know you're going to probably have a lot of people complaining as soon as Garth Sumberg has to put in fans over there, seeing as how he's right next to a big trailer park, just across the river there. But anyways, I'm just asking to be able to grow openly. So, and I thought that's what my whole CUP thing was all about. And then when I brought something up to my planner, you've got to do a road now. I mean, I asked about the road later, so I just want to be able to grow.
Melanie, you have a question?
I will spend if I can know that I'm going to be able to grow openly, I'll spend some money and figure out what to do about the road.
Oh, well, yes, I have a question.
Okay.
So you don't think that there would be, you don't have neighbors that would object, let's say, to
Well, my next
open-
door neighbor next to me, he wanted to grow, and he's like, oh, you're having all this problems just getting permit stuff. I don't know. I thought that's what this was supposed to be about, was the neighbors to be able to know that. But I read the letter and it didn't say nothing about the greenhouse being open and that they sent out.
Okay, because from my point of view, I'm in favor of the ecological approach that you mentioned, especially in light of the financial issues.
Yeah.
But part of our job here is to take into account the the public as well as a discretionary commission. So to answer your question, I personally would be fine with the ecological open scenario as long as there wasn't a lot of public controversy.
Yeah, and one of their big deals was about the road. Four out of the 6 pictures that they showed me, the county put in a disc golf course on Warren Creek Road. 4 of those is before that. So obviously that road's good enough to maintain extra 50 cars a day for that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it was one of my gripes is, well, if it's not good enough for me, why should it be good enough for 50 extra people? So,
Well, I'll let staff maybe address that, but I think that the road issue is something that it's beyond anything we can.
But if I may, just to be real clear on this point, despite that point you just made, I think that the clear language with regard to the cannabis ordinance doesn't really allow us to approve this without conditioning certain upgrades to the road to bring it to the equivalent of Category 4 standard. I hear what you said about the wanting to grow open air. So if, in fact, we are able to approve the exception request to allow open air greenhouses with no, fans and odor control, but attach the condition of road upgrades, that's a compromise that you could live with, and you would go forward with this?
depends what kind of upgrades they're looking for. I mean, I don't have money to go in and do a 1.5 mile long county road to make it 2 lanes. I mean,
right.
Obviously places like Alder Point and out Island Mountain where you guys just approved a cannabis thing up, that's got a couple of big single lane places, but signage, stuff like that is an easy fix.
Okay.
I have to see what the engineer.
Yeah, and I guess I maybe would like to understand a little bit better what level of upgrades are required here as well. So.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Director Ford?
Thank you. I think I would like to add try to bring some clarity to what is being asked for. It's often misunderstood that we're requiring the road to be improved to a Category 4. That's not it. What we're asking to understand is whether or not the road can accommodate the traffic that's being generated by this use, given the fact that it is less than a Category 4 road. In this particular case, this is one of those roads where Public Works has already identified it as being substandard. Okay, so it's right coming out of the chute. We know it's not Category 4. And there are some blind spots on it, and so there is some hazard there in terms of putting additional traffic on it. So what an engineering analysis would give us an understanding of is, can the road accommodate that additional traffic from the new cultivation site? And if it can't, what improvements are necessary to make it capable of supporting that additional traffic? Without that information, it's impossible to have a discussion.
Yeah, thank you. I understood that better, but I misspoke in characterizing it as just having to make the improvements right off the bat. But thanks, that's clarifying.
So, my question is then, so Mr. Costa is asking, he would be willing to get a report done to find out then if it's going to be too expensive for him to do the roadway, unless we can say that we would be approving an open grow. Is that correct?
Well, I think that is what he would like.
Right. So then, does it only affect the one neighbor that's within 600 feet, or would it be for any of the neighbors along the way?
This is a public hearing, and
yes,
it is one of the things that, particularly in 2.0, that we focused on was addressing the entire length of a private road, because a portion of this road is public, then it becomes private. And so that the maintenance obligations and the other things that go on the private section of the road do affect the residents and the property owners along that private section of the road. So it seems to have been the county's intention, Planning Commission Board's intention, that those owners along that section of the road would have the ability to express their concerns.
About the road?
About the
or
road.
Would it be the open grow, the smells as well? That's my question.
Well, given the fact that it is a conditional use permit, it is related, the finding that must be made is that it's not detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare. And so that's just not narrowly construed to, if there's no odor, it's good. I mean, but it doesn't mean that people's objection for no particular reason contribute to an adverse impact to the public health, safety, and welfare. So I'm being a little bit vague, not intending to be, but there's a lot of latitude there for the commission to consider in terms of what the public may have to say, in terms of what impacts there may be that they may bring up. I don't know that. You've seen some of the letters there. I think it may be beneficial for the commission to hear from the public also and get a sense of what the opposition is.
So are you,
Go ahead.
just along that same thought there, so what you're saying is we should continue it with, instead of a denial because of roads, say that there could be a report done and that it would go forward if the applicant wanted to go ahead with those improvements according to the possible report that then comes out.
I think the recommendation that I would make is that you should hear from the public, weigh whether or not you would even consider approving the project given any public comments that would be made. And then I would not guarantee that you're going to approve something, but say that you would be inclined to consider something subject to consideration of the additional information that's necessary.
So, if I'm hearing this right, you're asking us to continue this to a date uncertain, or do you have a date that you want to?
No, date uncertain.
Date uncertain. So, looking at the time, we're supposed to be out of here now anyhow, so I think that we should do that, and you bring it back to us, the sooner the better, but,
I would advocate, since the public is here.
Yeah, that's fine. I didn't realize there was one more. I thought it was just I didn't think anybody else was going to speak.
Thank you for taking the
Sorry.
time to listen to me today. I do have copies of the letter that was not turned in prior to this date. I'm speaking on behalf, my name is Sam, by the way, speaking on behalf of Myrna Weberg and Debbie Stamper, who are here today. I'm going to go ahead and just read a little bit for you. I'm going to do my best to keep this under the 3 minutes. So this is Debbie Stamper's letter that I believe you have received. It states, "We are writing this letter after receiving the notice of public hearing regarding the application for a commercial cannabis operation at the end of Warren Creek Road. We would like to support the staff in recommending the denial of the project based on the access road. Warren Creek Road is a dead-end road off of West End Road. We had a friend visit us this summer from Southern California. He drove onto West End Road and felt it was a narrow country road, but when he came to the sign, Road Narrows, he thought, you have got to be kidding. My point is that West End Road is narrow itself. Then once it turns onto Warren Creek Road, the first part is paved, but there are blind corners and blind hills and spaces narrow enough that neighbors watch for coming cars and pull over to let each other pass. As you drive on the unpaved section, the driving conditions only deteriorate. The unpaved section is not maintained by the county, and the neighbors contribute to a road fund, and we maintain this section ourselves. We have lived in our house since 1980. When we bought it, it was zoned to allow for a mother-in-law unit, which I thought we would take advantage of when my parents got older. We were surprised in 2013 when we applied for a permit to build that unit, and it was no longer allowed due to new fire safety rules. Our daughter has recently lost her home in Paradise, and we very clearly understand the importance of accessible evacuation routes. It is for these reasons we are hoping the Planning Commission will deny this application." That's from Debbie Stamper. And this letter is from Donald Weberg and Myrna Weberg on behalf of the Weberg Family Trust. The Weberg Family Trust is submitting this letter in response to the public hearing that will be addressing the application for a new commercial mixed cannabis cultivation on the property known as 1734 Warren Creek Road, Arcata. The property borders our 20-acre parcel, 1800 Warren Creek Road, Arcata. Our family home, barns, shops, and other buildings are located on 44 acres at the 1712 Warren Creek Road, Arcata, with a deeded right-of-way across the Costa property. The access road to 1800 Warren Creek Road has been in use in its current location by us, friends, and family members since we purchased the property in 1969. The aforementioned 20-acre property, which was purchased in 1971, is used as access to the Mad River to provide a level field to turn large equipment around and for recreation. The deeded right-of-way road across the Costa property has been maintained for several years in its current location by the Weberg family, brush cut back, grass trimmed, and gravel applied. As property owners and year-round residents, we are gravely concerned about the impact a commercial mixed cannabis cultivation will have on this four-generation family. There are additional concerns also listed in the letter that I would appreciate if you take time to read when you get a moment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Do we have a motion to continue this?
I would move that we continue this to a date uncertain, but I wanted to clarify that without this road report, I can't vote for any project. And while there's I guess a chicken and the egg type of issue, because if you don't want to do the report unless you know for sure that your community is going to support an outdoor grow, you have to weigh that risk as to whether you think your neighbors will support that. If you think that they will support it, then there's no reason why it couldn't be approved, absent evidence for why it can't be approved that your neighbors might provide. So I can't support any project without the evidence to be able to make the findings. But with that, I move to continue to a date uncertain.
I'll second that. And if I may just say as well, I didn't hear, I don't recall seeing the concern about odor cited in the letters that I reviewed or in the, testimony. It seems to me that there's a lot of other concerns, and most of them do center along the road. So as Commissioner McCavour said earlier, in the absence of real, extreme and fact-based concern about odor from neighbors, I am inclined to be very willing to support open air cultivation. I've lived right near, marijuana grows in the past, and I did not mind the smell that came a couple months a year. And I think there's a lot of other legitimate uses that we permit or allow that smell a lot worse than that, in my opinion. That said, in this case, it's really clear that the biggest cause for concern is the road. But if we could find out what it would take to make that safely passable and so forth, I personally think I would be inclined to support an open air cultivation exception. Yeah, somewhere at the beginning, I believe I seconded the motion.
Okay.
Proceeded to comment.
So we have a motion and a second to continue this to a date uncertain. Any further comment? No. Call for the question then. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Director, do you have anything?
I will be very brief. There was a question about the status of the Humboldt Wind Project and where we are with that. And that is something that I really did want to query the commission about tonight also. We are looking to produce the final EIR sometime in mid-October. And so we're looking to have a workshop perhaps as early as October 17th with the Planning Commission. And then I would like to ask if the Planning Commission would be willing to have one or more special meetings so that this doesn't drag out for a long, long period of time. There will be extensive public testimony. In fact, one of the ideas that was even kind of thrown out there is even having a special meeting on a Saturday just to be able to have a prolonged period to consider it. Because, I mean, we got, I think, over 300 letters on the EIR. So there will be a lot of comments. There'll be a lot of public input.
I'd say it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say I am totally willing to give some extra time to it. I'd really like to neither have it on an agenda with other items that bog stuff down, or give it short shrift because, well, we only scheduled one extra meeting and that's all the time we've got. So,
Go ahead.
I'd be willing to give it extra time as well, but my preference would be to start a special meeting with just that at like 4 o'clock and go till we're done.
Would that be feasible for the entire commission, or at least those here?
That's fine with me.
Sounds good.
So maybe
would be
Monday,
fine with
the
me.
26th, we could, I know that
October 26th?
October 26th. That's a Monday. So Thursdays would work? So special meetings on Thursdays?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make whatever happen, but
Yeah,
I
I mean,
prefer
I
that
can-
to a Saturday.
I prefer it to a Saturday too. I can usually work it on other weekdays, but if Thursday works for everyone and we've got enough Thursdays, then sure. So what, the regularly scheduled planning commission meetings for October would be?
As I recall, we've got the meeting of, I believe, the 3rd and the 17th. And then I'd probably look at trying to follow the 17th workshop up with a meeting
The 24th.
on the 24th.
So to be clear, the October 17th meeting is already scheduled to be a workshop on this item.
That's what I'm currently thinking, targeting, or what I may do. And it was primarily because right now there's not a huge amount of work that's looking to hit the 17th. We've got the 17th, the 24th, and the 31st as possible dates, sticking to Thursdays. Well, no, I guess not, huh?
No.
Sorry.
Not the 31st.
Yeah.
Kids
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the 17th and the 24th.
That's a good idea.
We come in costume.
Okay.
I'd be open
Are-
for the extra on the 24th.
Are there any other days besides Thursdays that, I mean, I know we're only 5 commissioners up here anyway, but, you know, are we only going to look at Thursdays? Are there other days that if we need an extra meeting and we don't want to do it on Halloween, that we might be able to schedule it for?
Then they have to look at this facility or moving it.
Right, and there's that.
Yeah, frankly, we can accommodate whatever you're willing to do. We can probably arrange, I don't know that this room is used every night. It will be primarily a matter of arranging for security to be late, to stay late. And I like the idea of starting early. That makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
I have something on Tuesday evenings, but other than that, I'm okay.
So would Wednesday evenings work?
Yeah, Wednesday could possibly.
Wednesdays are generally
Thursdays are preferable to me.
So perhaps we could go the 17th and either 24th and 30th, or 17th, 23rd, and 24th and 30th would be better.
17th, Thursday, 24th, a Thursday, and Wednesday, the 30th.
Correct.
You're suggesting, yeah.
Yep.
I could do those.
I could bypass a Harley owners group business meeting, or, yeah.
Wouldn't want to take you away from that.
Got it down.
Okay, thank you. That's all I really had tonight.
Let's go with it. With that,
thanks.
We're adjourned.
Just to be clear, are those starting at 4 p.m., all of them, or?
Those will all start at 4 p.m.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
They shut down.